Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Oklahoma City Planning Commission for Thursday, October the 11th. I'm working toward actually starting these meetings on time. We're only 3 minutes off today. That's not too bad. We have a new planning commissioner with us today, Matthew Hinkle, who's sitting in on the Ward 5 chair. You seem out of place, but that's because I'm not where I'm supposed to be. And we're so pleased to have him with us. He's going to provide us with some much-needed balance in our views of signs, I think. Long-time resident of Oklahoma City, long-time community involvement, and we're just really pleased to have him with us today. Thank you so much. Just wait until you see what you've gotten yourself into. For those of you who are with us for the first time, be safe. You've got a phone with you. Now would be a great time to turn it off. What in the world is that noise? The invasion may be happening even as we speak. We'll see. We have a little bit, if you're not familiar with how this works, we have a little bit of housekeeping to take care of here at the beginning. As we call each case in turn to be heard, we'll ask the applicant to come down, give us their name and address, tell us why they're here and what they're needing from us. The commissioners may ask questions of that applicant. If there are people present who wish to be heard on that matter, we will hear them in turn, same process. They'll come down, give us their name and address. We may or may not have questions for them. And the commissioners may discuss the matter amongst themselves, and we'll call for a vote on each item. If you are here to appear with respect to an item today, you'll find a form like this on the table outside in the hallway. If you'll fill it out, give us your name and address and that sort of thing. That's helpful for our records. We would appreciate that very much. And so, the first order of business for the day is to approve the minutes of the September 27th Planning Commission meeting. Not to approve, to receive the minutes.
Receipt of the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to receive the minutes of the September 27th Planning Commission meeting. If you'll please cast your votes. They are received. We have continuance requests. These are items that have already more or less been agreed to, but they're not actually continued until we vote. Would you read those for us, please?
Sure. For the record, item B18 on your agenda for case C7009 is deferred to October 25th. Item B19 on your agenda for case SPUD 1082 deferred to October 25th. Item B20 for case PC 10547 deferred to November 8th. And item B21 on the agenda for case PC 10533 deferred to December 13th.
Is there anybody here today that thought they were going to be heard on any of those items? If not, I'll take a motion.
Motion to continue cases B18 through 21.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue items 18, 19, 20, and 21. Would you cast your votes, please? They are continued.
We also did receive 2 new requests for continuance for item B14 on the agenda for case PUD 1694 to defer that to November 8th, and for item B16 for case CE 979 to defer to November 8th as well.
Is there anyone here today who thought they were going to be heard on either of those 2 items? If not, I'll take a motion.
I make a motion for approval of items 1 through 3. I'm sorry.
Motion to continue items number 14 and number 16.
I have a motion and a second to continue items 14 and 16. Cast your votes, please. They are continued. Do we have any new requests for continuance from any of the folks present here today? If not, we'll proceed with our public hearings. First of those is the consent docket. These are items that were so nearly in agreement that we didn't really feel like they needed to be heard individually, so they'll be voted on as a block. Could you read those for us, please?
Sure. We have 3 items on consent. The first item is case C-7033, the final plat of Castleberry Edition, Section 3. Item 2 is case C-7034, the final plat of Deerbrook, Section 2. And item 3 is case PC-10-549 to rezone 3705 North Meridian from SPUD 7 to the O2 district.
Is there anybody present who thought that they wanted to be heard on any of those items here today? If not, I'll take a motion.
I make a motion to approve items 1 through 3 on consent docket.
I have a motion and a second to approve items 1 through 3. If you cast your votes, please. They are approved.
Under items requiring a separate vote, item number 4 is case CE-975 to close a platted street west of North Chartel Avenue, north of Northwest 64th Street.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Here today on behalf of the applicant, who is Mr. Clay Farha. Also with me is Tim Johnson and Mark Zitzow from Johnson & Associates. The application before you is a closing application for the right-of-way between Chartel and I believe it's Hudson, and it's what would be 65th Street. Now, my client, Mr. Farha, owns everything you see on both sides of the right-of-way except for this bright green area. You might remember this case as it was set on your docket, I believe, a month or 2 ago. At the time, there was a protest letter that was submitted that was in your packet, and that was for this piece right here. I believe Picasso LLC is who owned that. As often is the case when there's an issue that generated protest, the commission asked that we go and try to work it out. And so my client, the owner of that property, were able to get together, find a solution that allowed the protest to go away. And so we are here before you now without that individual protesting. This is a bit of an odd case that probably warrants a little bit of discussion. So again, that bright green piece, in the original plat, it is shown as a park. So my client sought to have that park declared surplus so that he could buy it and incorporate it into his development, because again, he owns the balance of this. As he went to the Parks Commission did recommend to declare it surplus and recommended to the City Council that they issue a contract with my client to acquire that piece. As he worked his way to City Council, another individual came in, offered a number that was higher. The mayor and the council decided that it was probably best that it go back to the Parks Commission to be worked out among the parties, and so they could sort out the issues. In the interim, it was discovered by the city attorney's office that there is no record whatsoever of this park, and I use the term loosely, this park ever being dedicated or accepted by the city as a park. So the city has, I believe what Mr. Brummett will tell you, absolutely no ownership interest whatsoever in that park. As such, we're a bit unclear as to what the process is now, but I believe what Mr. Brummett has said is the city is willing to execute a quitclaim deed to transfer whatever ownership interest they have, which again is nothing, to whoever it is the council decides should own this. So, as of now, I'm not sure who owns it. But what we are seeking to do is to close this right-of-way, and if you could, Dave, do you have the aerial image you could put on the screen? What you'll see is this right-of-way, there it is, was never opened, it's never used. Trees are the predominant use of that right-of-way. So what we're asking to do, I think, is appropriate, compatible with what you see in other areas where right-of-way was never opened. I am told that there will potentially be somebody here, an attorney that represents an unknown person, that is the person that submitted the counteroffer that is higher than what my client had submitted. But again, back to what this Planning Commission typically wants parties to do, we sought to meet with this individual, and like I've done with every other protested zoning case, I called the representative for this individual. I was told very quickly that he would not tell me who his client was. I explained that made it kind of difficult for my client and his client to perhaps get in a room and try to work out the details, but he was steadfast that his client had not authorized him in any manner to tell who his client was. My next question was, well, what do they own? What impact is our closing application and subsequent vacation action going to have on your client's property that he has in the area? He was, again, unwilling to share what, if any, other tracts that his client owned within the area. So let's focus on the closing application as it relates to this park. It is worth noting that the right-of-way that exists west of our application, because if you see the dashed lines on that map in front of you, it stops. It doesn't go all the way to Classen Boulevard. So we stop it at the point to which we own property. So this is still open, not closed, not vacated, public right-of-way. So even this closing application, and even if my client is ultimately not the one that gains title to the park, the vacated right-of-way, the north half, would go to whoever it is that ends up with the park. That north half still has continuous open access to a public right-of-way. So we are not landlocking this park in any manner. It still has the absolute right to access that public and open right-of-way to Classen Boulevard. Yeah, it's being used as a parking lot now, but it is public right-of-way, and there would be no means by which anybody could stop the owner of this park or this from accessing it if they so desired. So what we're asking you to do today is make a recommendation to close this right-of-way so that we can go to City Council, ultimately have it closed there, and vacate the right-of-way. And again, the most important part, based upon what I think you're going to hear, if there is somebody here to protest, no matter what you do here, if his client is the one that ends up with the park, they will still have open access that touches the public right-of-way. So I don't see how, if he is the one that ends up with it, or she, how our application here in any way prejudices their right or limits their property. It is odd that somebody would want to buy a random piece of property in the middle of other property that they don't own any adjoining parcels, but be that as it may, if they are the one to buy the random piece in the middle, they will still have access to public open right-of-way. Your staff does recommend approval and be happy to answer any questions.
David, real quick on the way that the wedge meets is that space enough? I mean, it does meet public right away there, I guess, but if it's closed and they get that upper half, I guess maybe it's a question for Tim here, is that length big enough to provide access to that site? That
Not vehicular. It's 10 feet.
Right.
So it wouldn't allow vehicular traffic, but that triangle piece of park was dedicated back when Oklahoma City required in their subdivision regulations that anything that was below the 100-year floodplain had to be dedicated as parkland. And that's what that was. Over the years, the property owner to the north has told us that that low area had been filled with just junk, trees. So it's an old kind of a landfill site now, and trees have grown up in it. So it's not a piece of property you'd want to build a building on. If you could get vehicular access to it, it doesn't make sense to. There's not enough room. It's zoned R1. You couldn't put a building on it.
What's the square footage of that site?
I believe it's under 30,000 square feet.
The triangular piece?
I don't recall exactly, but I believe it's around 30.
But Commissioner, you ask a great question. One of the problems with not being willing to tell us who he is, perhaps if we could talk to this individual, we could work out a way that, my client needs this for additional parking. I'm not sure my client would have a big problem if we needed to perhaps widen that a little bit to allow for vehicular access. But when an individual protests but won't even tell us who they are, it's impossible to get anywhere on it.
Mr. Johnson, on this map in my staff report, which is, based on the actual plat map, it looks to me like where 5th Street meets Classen actually does have sufficient, this is like so many ifs here, if it were vacated and the north half of the right-of-way went to the property that is now the platted park, according to this map, it looks to me like there is sufficient room for vehicular access.
It would drop to the center line of the 45-foot.
And so where this map shows that angling off flat then to Classen is actually, it shows the middle of that space. I guess part of what I'm asking is the parking lot there that's actually, yeah, there you go.
This is 36.2 for the flat.
Okay,
That means the north half would be 18.1.
okay, okay.
And I did talk to my client. He's willing to agree, if necessary, to give whatever the width that would be needed to allow vehicular access. If this individual, in fact, needs vehicular access, he's willing to grant that as part of this closing application and ultimately the vacation action.
But again, at the moment, we don't even know who owns the property, right? Because
Well, at the moment,
we think it's
the heirs of whoever,
platted the property,
Platted.
then, okay,
no matter what happens, this is going to end up in a quiet title suit to figure out who owns what.
okay. Okay. Commissioners, do we have any questions, comments?
Just one, and I think it's a staff-related
And
question.
I have someone who's signed up to speak, so.
How would we incorporate, based on the discussion we just had, how would we incorporate such a limitation into this closure to grant that 18 feet?
We don't grant that 18
Understand.
feet. That would be part of the vacation process if it goes on to district court and it's vacated.
Okay, so that's not something that I want to be clear, that's not something we can even do.
Yeah, not our deal. I do have someone signed up to speak. Mark, is it Henriksen? Yes, ma'am. Would you come down and give us your name and address, please?
I'm Mark Henriksen. I work at 600 North Walker, just up the street. I'm a lawyer here on behalf of a corporate client, Biltmore Park LLC, who has an interest in acquiring the park. We tried to acquire the park, or tried to make a bid on the park back in June, and the Parks Department informed us that nothing was going on. The next thing we learned was that the Parks Board had recommended selling this property as surplus property belonging to the City of Oklahoma City to NHG, the applicant for this street vacation. This map shows how the property presently sits, and clearly, if this application is granted, the park would be landlocked. It's simply the vacated road goes beyond the distance of the park, so it would be landlocked. Perhaps concessions could be made by NHG to allow otherwise, but there would not be a public right-of-way allowing the owner of this property. And so that would reduce the universe of potential bidders for this property, which the city still intends to sell. I spoke with Mr. Brummett recently, and it's my understanding that the city is going to be receiving bids for this on or about October 23rd. So I think it's a little bit misleading to say the city doesn't own it. The city is proposing to sell its interest and to collect a check and keep the money.
If I could stop you there, can you clear up that for us, please?
Yes, ma'am. We have no interest in the park. As a matter of fact, we didn't even know there was a park there until Mr. Bach's client came down to the Parks Commission and offered to buy it. With all the title work that I've done on that indicates to me that we don't own any interest in it. However, Mr. Henriksen's client and Mr. Bach's client have offered to give us money to give them a quitclaim deed to something we don't think we own, but if they want to do that, they're going to purchase whatever interest we have, which we think is nothing.
Okay. So what they'll be getting in return is a quitclaim deed?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
The Parks Board recommended that it be sold to NHG for a price of $17,000. That was the first time my client became aware officially that the city was proposing to sell its interest. We made a letter to the members of the City Council objecting to that and making a cash offer of $51,000. The City Council remanded the matter back to the Parks Board. I appeared before it in August, and the Parks Board voted to rescind the recommendation it had made to sell the green property to NHG and to put it out for proposals for bids, and it's my understanding that that's what the city is going to do. I acknowledge that the title to this is one quiet title action away from being resolved. But if the Planning Commission grants this today, or recommends this today, then you are in fact saying that the people who will have access to this property as of leaving here today, or at least as of whenever this is ultimately vacated, absent some future agreement with NHG, would be NHG, which owns property on two sides of it, and the neighbor to the north, Merrimack, which also abuts it. So instead of the whole world being able to bid on this property and getting the biggest market possible and the highest return for the taxpayers of Oklahoma City, you will certainly be creating some impediments where only two people would have free access without some other unknown concession in the future. They've known all along who my client is.
Let me stop you there. Is it asking too much for you to offer us an opinion on that topic? I mean, my understanding of how closings and vacations work comports with the explanation that Mr. Box has given us. Is it too much to ask you to opine on the issue of whether the park property, not either party here, because we are not part of that process, but whether the park property will in fact retain access to a public street?
They will get one half of the street right-of-way for 65th.
Right.
That happens when a street's vacated, half of it goes to the owners of each side. So they will acquire the right-of-way for the half of the right-of-way for 65th. Now, how that gets out to Classen, I'm not really sure. That's Mr. Johnson's bailiwick.
Well, the park property does not abut Classen, and so Merrimack would get half of the property beyond the park property, and NHG would get half of the property. So the park property would be landlocked.
65th Street does go all the way out to Classen, and as I understand it, if the park property obtains the north half of whatever is eventually vacated, they would have that access to the remainder, that westernmost piece of 65th.
Well, that's not what my map would suggest, ma'am. I mean, it speaks for itself. There's an area here. It does not go to Classen in several feet west of it.
Well, I can't speak to the validity of your map. What I have in my staff report is a plat map, so. Would you please? Yeah, we need to sort this out.
We did the research at the county, and according to the recorded plat of Biltmore Park, it included that little 36.2-foot stub that goes to Classen. You could not find anything recorded for any kind of closure or vacation.
Okay.
We do know, and you can see the picture on the other map, it's being utilized apparently by the building to the south of it
Right.
as a parking lot, and it has a little retaining wall on it. It's never been closed or vacated.
I think I understand what he's asking, and it's actually a really good point. And I don't think it has to do necessarily with the 36.2, but there is a portion, there's a space, right, between the very tip of the point of the park and this edge of the right-of-way beyond it. And north of that line, right, is a different property. So do they get that portion?
They would get this, you would take the center line of this piece, and where it interconnects with the center line of Mitchell, everything north of that would go to the park, to the limits of the park property.
So none of it would go to the property above that?
That's correct. They're not a party to the plat. That tract north of there does not, it wasn't part of the plat itself.
Okay, so it could only go, does that make sense to you?
I believe that what would vacate in favor of the park property would end at this point, and I do not think that would give it access to Classen.
He's saying otherwise. I'm not a...
We think that it would be, all this would go as part of the park property.
If that was the case, does that answer the issue?
We don't think it is the case. I would think that the safer thing, the applicant will not be prejudiced if you delay this until we have this sale. If the applicant is the high bidder, we won't be back complaining about the vacation because we won't have any vested interest in this. If the city's property sells to Biltmore Park, then we will be back here again protesting objection at least of the property lying south of the Biltmore Park property that we would then own. It seems that this is being rushed for no particular reason other than to reduce the sales price that the city might get because of an additional obstacle that we would have to overcome as the new owner, if in fact we are. We were 3 times higher than NHG in the last time that propositions were made. So we're in good faith trying to maximize the value of this property that my client wants to acquire. We don't know if we'll get it or not. They're going to have a competitive bid process. And in looking out for the taxpayers and the citizens, a short delay to allow this sales process to complete would be in the benefit of the taxpayers, and I urge you to do that. May I answer any questions?
What is the delay?
Commissioners, do we have any questions of the protestant's attorney? No? The park won't be used for anything. I mean, it's not a park. It'll be part of the development of the area, however that works out. Would you like to speak to the issue of the urgency?
Yeah, so we filed this quite some time ago. I fail to see what interest the unknown client has at this point. He is a potential bidder, just like, I guess, everybody. He has no standing that I can see to ask for a delay. We're going to have 6 weeks between now and council, and again, I find it a bit troubling that his client isn't willing to talk to us to figure out maybe there's a way we can all work together and this can be incorporated into our development and plat and everything else. And so it's a bit strange that somebody's coming here not willing to tell us who they are with no stake in it as we sit here today on a closing application to close right-of-way that has never been opened. So
Mr. Hendrickson says he represents Biltmore LLC, that may be Biltmore Park LLC. I don't know whether we ever have more information than that about a lot of people who come down to either support or protest an application. Do we have any sense at all of how long it will take to resolve the sale? I mean, is it something that's going to be done in the next 2 weeks, 10 days, or is it?
We had to extend the time for the submitting of bids because this was delayed at the council. The bids now are going to be received on October the 6th, and then they'll make the award at that time. November 6th. November 6th, right.
So the earliest it could come back to us on that timetable would be
The meeting.
2 days later, on November 8th.
What is the October 23rd date?
the receiving of the bids.
Receiving. So you have to have your bid in by October 23rd. They'll be open November.
You have to have it in by the 6th. We moved that back from the 23rd because it was
Okay, thanks, Dan.
canceled.
How many more auctions can the city have for property that they don't own?
Yeah,
We need to find all these parcels and put them out to competitive bid immediately.
Commissioners, do I have any further questions, comments, concerns?
I do. Why wouldn't the applicant simply agree to, could we not fully extend the vacated right-of-way all the way through? Could we not vacate a portion and leave this portion that's in dispute? It would seem to me that that would be the best alternative. It allows him to proceed, the city's not preventing access, and we're avoiding all the private issues that are lingering in the background here of which we have no authority or control. But I don't know what issue, I mean, ultimately you're going to be back to vacate a very small piece, but it moves it forward without essentially harming Biltmore Park LLC.
But you may have a better, later on, you may have a better sense of ownership for that piece.
I totally agree. And if it winds up that the ownership belongs to NHG, then ultimately they come back and they close that last remaining piece. If it winds up that it's some other third party who bids by October 23rd to a piece of property that the city doesn't own, then they have access to it. So to me, that seems like the easy solution, but maybe I'm missing something.
So Mr. Farha is willing to modify his application to stop at the easternmost edge of the park. So we
Leaving all of the park
That's
out
right.
of it.
And if this gentleman's client does obtain it, then They have full right-of-way.
Problem solved, I think.
I'm authorized to agree to that.
Fantastic.
No problem solved.
Good to have the authorization.
I'll take a motion.
Make a motion to approve the application amending to remove the portion of the right-of-way that fronts Biltmore Park.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 4, amending it to
I
exclude
guess we're recommending approval. My apologies.
the portion of the property that abuts Biltmore Park. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Item 5 is DA 25489. This is a lot split deed approval at 6224 and 6212 Southwest 3rd Street. This does require a variance to the subdivision regulations on frontage length.
Good afternoon. My name is Darren Rayburn. I'm employed at 4045 Northwest 64th Street. I am here representing Adam Saxton with the Saxton Group. We are asking for a track split. We tried to go administratively and kind of ran into some issues about the current site and the availability of the 25-foot frontage along Southwest 3rd Street. So we're asking for a variance of 15-foot instead of the 25-foot.
So, staff, JJ, this is why this is on the agenda, because of the variance that's required. Otherwise, it would have been administratively approved.
That's correct.
Okay. I just want to be sure I was focused on the right issue. Let me ask, is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this matter today? No? Commissioners, do we have any questions or comments or concerns? Or we have a variance request, so we'll have to vote that separately. I'll take a motion.
I make a motion we approve the variance.
I have a motion and a second to approve the variance on item number 5. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
I further make the motion to approve the application.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 5. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you very much.
Item number 6 is case C-7029. It's a preliminary plat of K-Rock Development.
Good afternoon, Tim Johnson with Johnson & Associates. Here on behalf of the applicant. If you recall, we were here a couple weeks ago talking about the, can you scroll down on that? There we go. Talking about the preliminary plat, and there was a question that came up about limits of no access along our Block 1 adjacent to Rockwell and Memorial Road frontage. We submitted some information to the staff, traffic staff, and they've come back with TE number 2, which we agree with, as well as 1 and 3. We'd ask for your approval.
Is there anybody else present who wishes to be heard on this item? Commissioners, we've talked about this one before. Do I have any comments or questions, concerns to be expressed? If not, I'll take a motion.
I will make a motion to approve the preliminary plat for item number 6C, 7029.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 6. Would you cast your votes, please?
Thank you.
It is approved.
Item number 7 is case SPUD 1077 to rezone 1233 Northeast 6th Street from R2 to the SPUD 1077 district.
Good afternoon. Scott Sidwell, 743 Northwest 99th Street.
Tell us what it is you're proposing to do with this piece of property.
We would like to convert it to a fourplex, 2 bedrooms in each unit.
I met with Mr. Sidwell. You may recall I had asked this item be continued so that I would have the opportunity to do that. The property has a little sign on front of it that indicates that it was once a hotel, so it's sort of being converted from one kind of residential use to another. I was very, very pleased to learn that Mr. Sidwell is married to a landscape architect, so I have no concerns about that part of the application. And frankly, I just wanted to be sure that, what was being done here was something that would be a positive contribution to this area, and I feel very comfortable with the use that he is wanting to make of it and the plans that he has for developing that use. So, is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this item here today? If not, I'll take a motion.
I have one question. In the last application we reviewed before the last meeting, there was some concern from staff over the 3 parking spaces on the south side. That's been resolved to the staff satisfaction, I guess?
I think that it has been agreed that they will not be used, or if you've been by to look at the site, they're not really very functional. So,
Right.
and they certainly are not being used to consider the parking requirement, so.
I just want to make sure.
I think what I understand, and JJ can correct me if I'm wrong, but language has been incorporated into the document saying that those would be removed and that the site plan will be modified before it goes to City Council showing no parking on the south.
Anyone else?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval to City Council on item number 7, SPUD 1077.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 7. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Item number 8 is case SPUD 1078 to rezone 4538 South May Avenue from C3 District to SPUD 1078.
Could you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Good afternoon. Inandina Ramirez. The address is 4538 on South May Avenue.
And tell us what it is you're asking us for.
I would like this location zoned to where I could put a taco truck.
I understand that there's already a taco truck there that's actually pretty good.
Yeah, we need to have it corrected, coded.
So we're actually sort of bringing this into compliance with the existing use, I think, would probably be the best way to put that. Is there anybody else here today who wants to be heard on this matter? If not, commissioners, do we have comments, questions, concerns?
This just adds the use.
And we discussed before that we really kind of need to come up with a better way to do this, but...
Yes, I was going to say. That's probably better.
A rezoning request for something that's really to add a single use like this that's actually consistent, but it's just not a use unit that's, incorporated, so.
Just out of curiosity, how did this wind up here? Did the applicant, did you just decide to file it, or were they cited? What created the need to?
It was brought to their attention that the location wasn't zone coded and needed to be updated for them to continue.
So I'm guessing the latter.
Okay.
And the one question that I have about this, and maybe it's more for staff than anybody else, there's no site triangle issue. This is right on that corner. We don't have an issue with that in terms of how it's situated. No. Good. Okay. All right.
I make a motion to recommend approval of the application.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 8. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Is the taco truck here?
Can we go check it out right now?
Just thought I'd ask. You never,
Thank you. You have a nice afternoon.
Item number 9 is SPUD 1079 to rezone 3441 Northwest 50th Street from R1 to SPUD 1079.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Massey with Red Plains Professional, representing Dr. Stetson on this application. This application is a request to rezone the tract there at the corner of Northwest 50th and Summit Avenue from R1 to SPUD for a limited office use under the O1. We have reviewed the staff recommendations and TEs and are agreeable to those, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
This is actually in my ward. You are going to build a new building on this side, is that right?
That is correct. At this point, we are planning on, or Dr. Stetson is planning on building a new medical office facility.
And that building will observe the front yard setback so that it will be consistent with the other properties to the east.
That is correct.
Okay.
So, if I could, Janice, is this the Wirtz property, the widow Wirtz property?
I'm sorry, the which?
Just out of curiosity, we've had about 3 applications on this corner in the past, and there's always been a protestant. And so, is this that property? Or do you know?
Quite I have no idea. This is my first time to bring this application up here.
Well, that's
Commissioner Hensing,
probably
I think
beneficial for you.
she owned the property to the north, behind this property.
I thought she was on the corner.
Well,
I could be wrong. Never mind.
not the corner of 50th, but she was on the corner.
Okay. Somebody signed up?
Is Dr. Stetson actually here today? Are you the same person that brought that application low those many years ago? No. Okay.
Okay.
Applicant agrees to TE.
Yes.
One question, so sorry. On the site-proof screening, it says all commercial dumpsters shall be screened with 6-foot opaque enclosure consistent with building architecture. Typically, the language we just see is that it screens sufficient height that it screens the dumpster from view.
Yes, that is correct, and I believe within the SPUD document, it does identify a minimum 6-foot height on that screening.
Okay. Just different language than we normally see. I don't know that we care. I just want to point it out. I don't particularly have a problem, but somebody else might.
We can certainly make that amendment to ensure that it's a minimum 6-foot height on that screening for the dumpster.
Is there anybody else here today who wished to be heard on this matter? If not, I'll take a motion.
Motion to recommend approval to City Council.
6-foot screening on...
with the amendment to the dumpster screening.
Right.
Did I get a second? I have a motion and a second to approve item number 9 with the amendment to the language on the dumpster screening. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 10 is case SPUD 1081 to rezone 70709 North Rockwell from SPUD 1033 to SPUD 1081.
I'm James Hobie, representing Lloyd Holdings Group. My address is 4540 Southeast 81st Street, Oklahoma City. This application is only to change what can go into this building. This particular property, this is the 3rd time we've done a spud here, but only because the first time they built it, the prospective tenant was a restaurant, and then that didn't go through, and then the next prospective tenant was a mattress factory, and then the next one is now a hair salon. So if that explains why I've been here on this thing, it's just the use. There's no change in design statement, setback, or anything else, building size.
So, is this the only use that's going in that building? It's pretty big, or just a portion of it?
Well, this would just amend the use to
It adds a use to the existing
Right,
uses.
but it's not going to be the sole use, because that's a fairly large...
Right, yeah.
You just want to add this use to that, okay.
The salon will be the first tenant, but it won't be.
Okay, understood.
I have one question. My staff report indicates that the site should not hide the continuous system of open space behind it. And so I would like just a little bit of explanation about what that means.
I think that means they don't want a fence. This is the first time I've heard that. And there is no plan. I mean, we'd have to get a permit to do it, so. We're not requesting.
We're going to go with that explanation, I think.
There is a very thick treed green belt behind there, and that may be what that's in reference to.
Yeah, along the back of this, there's, well, you can see Rockwell, then there's the building, and then there's that big berm, I guess, for longer. Right. And I think there's a creek that flows back there, of natural trees and vegetation that screens potentially some residential uses, but from that neighborhood, but I think that's what they're referring to. You want to keep the trees and no fence? Yeah. Tell us what you want.
All we were saying is that there's a gorgeous view back there that is currently fenced off. The spud requires screening, and we were just saying that perhaps maybe it shouldn't require a fence there. That's where, it's not a TE or anything, it was an observation.
Okay.
So you think the fence could be deleted?
The requirement for the fence.
It was consideration for both the applicant and the commission about whether screening should be required as a stockade fence.
I would not necessarily require fencing so long as the screening, the mature trees remain to act as that screen.
And the owner on this particular property has been very careful.
Excuse me, but, I mean, if there are mature trees there that act as screening, doesn't that meet the screening requirement?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would think so,
So it's
yeah.
not like we're actually,
But I don't want them taking out the trees and not then putting in a fence.
yeah. Can we find some way to add that
make-
language
that
that
make
makes
sense?
sense to somebody in the future? Thank you.
There's no plan to remove any trees.
Great.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Have you had to pay an application fee each time you've been here to get this use amended?
Yes.
You have any other uses?
Got anything else you want to think about?
Because I mean,
Taco truck.
I might
Throw in a food truck, maybe?
I might take 2 weeks, and you could add a lot of uses. I mean, if it's suitable for these things, I just hate that. I mean, I mean that. I hate that you've had to come 3 times and go through a 100-day process to get a hair salon added and whatever else it was.
It has quite a few uses, actually. I think the issue is that initially the PUD or SPUD, as the case maybe, it's probably a PUD initially, was, a sort of a medical office park. And so it was drawn in that way. As it has become, sort of more general commercial.
I understand. These are good examples of where there's a small business owner that wants to open a hair salon. It's going to take 100 days to do it. So it's a good example of times we should be more thoughtful when we're considering uses. I'm making a point. I'm not talking about your application. Yes, sir. Just have a chance to make a point. I'm going to make it.
And we thought that the hair salon would fall under retail, but it didn't. It comes under personal care.
Unfortunately, our code is a little antiquated in some ways, so.
Okay, if there's nobody signed up, I will move approval of the application. I want the trees to stay. If the trees come down, we got to have a fence for screening.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 10 with the language that we're going to add with respect to the tree preservation. Did I ask if there was anybody else here who wanted to be heard on this item before we vote? No, that's good. Okay. Commissioners, would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 11 is case PUD 1680, excuse me, to rezone 6601 East Britton Road from AA agricultural to PUD 1680.
Good afternoon again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Again with me is Mr. Tim Johnson, and Luke Roundtree is the developer here. This is a PUD application to take it from AA to a modified RA. The commission will be a little bit familiar with this area in that it is immediately south of the Oakdale neighborhood. So if you look north of our property on the map in front of you, that's the Oakdale neighborhood. This has been an area of the city that has been fairly active in the last 10 years by way of development. This is an urban low in the comp plan designation. And so when we first came here to the Planning Commission, it was asked of us through staff to go see about connecting to the public sewer. As the Commission is aware, one of the policies within the comp plan is the extension of public sewer. And so this is what we started with, but we continued it for quite some time to allow ourselves the opportunity to see if public sewer was, in fact, available and legally accessible. So Mr. Johnson, through his magic of engineering, was able to create a map showing where the sewer is, the nearest point, for us to be able to bring it to our site. And so where you see this yellow is where it is. That is 3,100 lineal feet away from our site. We spent a great deal of time and effort visiting with this property owner, seeing if they would be willing to grant us an easement or allow us to buy an easement to cross them with the sewer, because us as a private developer have no means by which to go and condemn to acquire that. It is worth noting that the distance that the sewer is away from our site is outside of the range in which the city can require us, through the subdivision regulations, to extend. So we did give it that effort. It ultimately proved to be unfruitful, and so we came back here, I believe it was a month ago, and there was an individual here, and she is here today, that was here in protest. Unfortunately, we were not aware that she had been here several times. We had never been contacted and weren't aware. So we continued it to allow ourselves the opportunity to visit with her. It was a very productive meeting, I think. What we discovered was, unfortunately, she owns the 80 acres to our east. She was not treated very well by the developer who developed north of her, or perhaps the individual homeowners. She expressed her concern and her troubles that she had gone with the people who own homes to the north. And so we sought out to try to find a way to resolve potential conflict with our development and the folks to the north. One of the benefits we think that she has in this particular developer is that they are not just the developer, but they are also the home builder. So she now has an open line of communication with Mr. Roundtree as they move forward. Additionally, she expressed some concern that the way that fences are normally done in developments are, the fence only gets built once the individual house is built. She expressed a desire to have the entire eastern line of our property have a fence day one to try to help eliminate some of those problems. My client did agree to do that, so that is something that we could put into the PUD document. When we think about sewer extension and why potentially it's problematic to allow developments to go in without sewer extension, it's the impact that not extending sewer could potentially have on the rest of the basin. Tim's a better engineer than an easel, but... So if you look at this tract, what you see in red is the balance of the basin. So what it is meant to show is by allowing this tract to develop, we have water, no sewer. Without sewer, it doesn't prohibit the balance of the basin from still being able to extend the public wastewater infrastructure. In addition, we're willing to grant an easement across our site so that this site to the east, if it ever develops, single family or something else, will have the ability, without this person having to condemn, to connect to that wastewater system. So with that, we believe we have a development that is compatible with the area. If you look at the predominant land use in the area, it's certainly single family, lots of half-acre type lots. Our PUD asked for 30,000 square foot lots. So there are some TEs in the staff report that I would like to address briefly, and the staff has couched it in terms of alternative. So TE number 1 is approval of the application subject to the following technical evaluations. 1A is connect to the public wastewater system. So we can't agree to that for all the reasons I stated. I believe that it is legally non-accessible to us and outside of the window in which the city can force us to connect to the wastewater system. B is install sidewalks. We do agree to that. C is specify tree preservation areas and or methods. We can agree to that. And D is amend the master design statement to require street subs to the east and west. We can agree as it relates to the west. It's our desire to not connect to the east based upon our conversations with the individual that owns the property to the east. She's also here again and perhaps will express some of the same considerations. I think what we have here is an ability to preserve a lot of the trees. If you look at this site, it is heavily treed. If you think about what would happen if we came in here with sewer, you're likely to see much greater density, much smaller lots, and more homes. And when you have all of that, you're going to have to remove more tree cover. So having 30,000 square foot lots allowed us the opportunity to put into the PUD a minimum tree preservation of 40%. And so we're going to be able to create a neighborhood that is more compatible with the nature of this area and save as many trees as possible and incorporate those into the development. So with that, I'd ask for your approval, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
50% covered.
What's that?
50% on the trees. That's what we talked about in our meeting.
I asked you to ask, and I said I'd ask my client. Again, it's a bit of an arbitrary number, except 40 we believe we feel comfortable with. 50, yeah, I'm going to let the engineer.
One thing we've discovered, because the two pipelines that cross the X on the property, we have no control over them. And unfortunately, they recently came out and cleared their property. So that, the right-of-way is 7% of our overall area. So we don't have any control over that 7%, and like I said, unfortunately, they just denuded it.
Is that what's represented on the drawing there?
These X's.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay.
And so by eliminating the ability to utilize that 7% in our overall calculations, it will really make it hard to allow the homeowner the flexibility of clearing enough trees to build a house. And so that's why we've, like David said, the intent is to not clear, they're going to sell these lots as acreage treed lots, which bring more money. It'll be up to the homeowner to be particular about which trees they keep. And in the plat notes, as we've done in other plats, we'll be very specific about that we have to retain 40% of each lot, which will end up with greater than 40% overall, because we have open space here and open space here. But to put the note in at 50% per lot, it would be difficult to control, I think. So that's my explanation.
I mean, in fact, it'd be impossible to control. I mean, if you think about why we put regulations into PUD, it's to have the ability from the city to be able to enforce it. And so when you start putting percentage of tree coverage in a residential style PUD, there's nothing that would prohibit the homeowner the day after they go buy that house from clearing every tree on their lot. And so I don't think it's a good position for the city to be in, to be putting regulations that are absolutely unenforceable into PUDs.
Well, if you don't believe that they're enforceable, then why don't we go ahead and agree to a higher number?
Well, I think I'd be giving bad counsel to my client as a lawyer, so I don't think I can advise my client to do that.
I actually would not approve of that approach. When we look at the TEs
Yes,
real
ma'am.
quickly, under 1A, connect to the public wastewater system, not doing that. The to install sidewalks on all streets, we are doing that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We're going to specify a tree preservation area or method. We're going to write some actual language into the...
We can write some language, and we can, through a map, we can amend as we or revise as we move towards council.
What we've done in the past is put a note on the plat, because that's where you can really make the homeowner adhere to it.
And then on the master design statement, require street stubs to the east and west. We are doing that.
Well, so, to the west.
To the west.
To the east, because we're going to be building that fence on day one, as a concession to our neighbor to the east, we'd ask to not have to connect to the east. That's...
Okay. Yes, I have her. Okay. We'll have to come back to that. Commissioners, do we have any other questions for the applicant before we hear from our person who has signed up to speak?
And we could always stub it, even though there's a fence there, so she'd never know.
That's what I was
someday in the
thinking.
future, but we leave it to the sound discretion of this.
Thank you. Sally Henderson. Hello. Pull that down to your...
I'm Sally Henderson,
Thank you.
6701 East Britton Road, and the homeowner for the property to the east of the property in question. And yes, we had a lovely meeting. I felt much better after the meeting than I had before. I also would add that not only is the pipeline denuded where the X is, but also the entire Britton Road part is denuded due to the pipeline people. They took a lot of stuff out of there already that would have helped with that 50% issue. Just found out about I think it's called the TE, that would suggest a road up the east side, which would be along my property. And my one of my concerns about the entire project is how much it displaces what's already there, both flora and fauna.
To be clear, we're not talking about running a road up that line. we're talking about one of the little things that they show now kind of as a cul-de-sac, actually being able at some point in the future, if your property were to develop, that there would be a place, just a place where it could connect.
The city promotes connectivity between neighborhoods, so if you did sell, as she's saying...
I can assure you that is not going to happen. And we also have a transfer on death deed, and the next people who own it, I can assure you that is not going to happen. So you would be waiting at least a whole lot of years. That is not going to happen. So access for me or whoever chooses to build over there is not a necessary thing to consider. And I don't want anybody to be encouraged to be really close to my fence if they don't have a right to be. And that's what roads do. If you spend any time around that area, you'll find out that anywhere there's a blind road, there's trouble. So, I would like to thank the group for being willing to listen. I know you kind of made them do that, but they were very genial about it.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. That pleases me. Any other comments you want to make? Thank you. Thank you for coming down. And I'm sorry that you came several times without us realizing, and so that we could get you connected a little earlier. But thank you for being so persistent. I appreciate it. I really do. Do we have any questions of Ms. Henderson? No? No, you're fine. You're fine. Commissioners? Comments, questions, concerns, emotion, thoughts?
So, we're going to have the stub or not?
That's
Just
the
out of
question.
curiosity.
Right.
I would prefer that there be one. Show me, Mr. Johnson, if you could, where would be the most likely place?
Most likely would be in this spot here. Now, I might point out, we already have a street right-of-way abutting here on the west side that would count as a stub or connectivity point, so that if this ever develops, that cul-de-sac would continue as a street. So we think we meet the west request, but as Ms. Henderson said, you know, for generations away, we're going to build a street that's public, the city's going to have to maintain it, we're going to have RVs parked on it, and it's a waste of our clients' money at this point in time, unfortunately.
Well, I'm not as concerned about the waste of your client's money, all due respect, as I am about the question she raised, which is sometimes these things do become sort of a nuisance to...
You're not gated, are you, Tim?
No.
This is not
Public
planned to
streets.
be a gated neighborhood.
That's correct.
Is there... Sorry, were you going to...
No, I just don't know that in this particular case I see the benefit of the stub given.
Is there any way...
I'm just not clear that it's a good idea, but...
Well, instead of actually having developers in these situations like build out the stub, can we just preserve the land for, actually do it in the future?
But then who's going to do it is the point. I mean, you know...
They build the stub and put a crash gate there, typically, right? Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're going to lose 2 lots for nothing. I mean, you're going to have, who's going to take care of that? The HOA? I mean, I'm all about the street stubs. I've been sold on this, so I bought it, okay? But there are instances where it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and I don't know that I see just a ton of value here. I guess I'd love to hear staff's point if they think it's super important, but just to, I know we're not all concerned about the developer's money, but to strip them of a lot for no reason is silly to me. Sorry, silly.
Again, not as concerned about that as I am about the issue of it becoming a nuisance in the meantime. If it really is, you know, a multi-generational future possibility as opposed to something that we can see coming, I'm not sure there's a lot of value in insisting on it here. So
That's as good a reason as mine. I'll take that one, too.
I thought you might. So I need a motion, with or without a stub.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval for PUD 1680 without the inclusion of the required street stub.
At the-
Oh, and
on the
eliminating
eastern side.
TEA1. We did it weird.
It would basically be
1A.
eliminating TED as well.
Yes.
Because TED is both east and west stubs, and if they meet it on the west, they don't need that TE at all.
So I'll start over. I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the City Council on PUD 1680, eliminating TE 1A and 1B.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 11, eliminating TE 1A and D. Cast your votes, please. It's approved.
Nice music.
Your phone ringing?
Item number 12 is PUD 1695 to rezone 201 and 203 Northeast 50th from I-2 to PUD 1695.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Again, on behalf of the developer, and with me, who I do want to have speak, is Mrs. Kirkendall in a moment. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the PUD and what we're doing, and then I'm going to let her explain the mission of Pivot and what opportunity this is going to present. So this is a PUD that would allow for the development and build out of tiny homes. As you see on the site plan in front of you, this is a representation created by Mr. McCowan showing where these tiny homes would be built. I would like briefly to talk about the technical evaluations. There are 3, and we do agree to all of them, except I want to modify TE number 1 if possible. And if you go back to the previous image. And so what this asks us to do is to provide sidewalks along the entire street frontage of Walnut. So we agree to provide sidewalks along Walnut, except we'd ask for that to be limited to the southernmost point of our northernmost drive. If you could go to an aerial, I'll show you why. You know, we hear a lot of times about sidewalks to nowhere. What people usually mean by that is there's just no other sidewalks in the area. Obviously, the policy of the city is there could be at some point, and so there's a need to go ahead and build those so that they can connect. Here, it would actually be a sidewalk to nowhere, because when you go north of our property, it is private property, fenced off, and fully developed as an apartment complex. And so the stretch of sidewalk that would be required north of our northernmost drive would literally serve no one. It would just be an expense that this group would have to bear, and we're asking that you have some consideration for this group, their mission, and the lack of viability of that sidewalk. So we do agree to all the TEs, but we would ask that number 1 be modified to read to not force us to do anything north of our northernmost drive. If there's any specific questions about the PUD, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, I will turn it over.
Hi, I'm Kemi Kirkendall. I'm the CEO for Pivot, a turning point for youth at 201 Northeast 50th. And our mission at Pivot is truly to be that turning point for youth. We work with teenagers and young adults that have lived in very unstable situations, either at home where there's mental health and substance abuse issues, lots and lots of issues of poverty and generational poverty. And our services are designed to meet basic needs in housing, help with education and employment opportunities, help them form healthier relationships with mentors and coworkers that will help them for their future, and then their overall well-being, mental health, substance abuse, health. What we're missing is affordable housing. So imagine families struggling, dealing with the cycle of poverty, young people living on their own without the resources and experience to access housing that they can maintain, and also that they can plan for their future, for their own families. So this project would allow us to add actual brick and mortar support while young people are receiving the services that we provide already through our network of resources, services, and connections to our community. So I'm happy to take any questions about our mission or what this would mean for our young people. This helps our community in the future. Our youth are our future, and the more that they can be resourced adequately to develop into a self-reliant, responsible member of our community, the better our community overall is in the future.
Commissioners, I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to sit down with the applicant on this project. I just could not be more supportive. I just think it is a on one hand, so needed, and on the other hand, just a wonderful, wonderful step in the right direction in the lives of people whose directions are not always headed in the right direction.
That's right.
So I think we have a little bit of an amendment to the site plan that we have in our staff report, the actual layout of the facilities. I was not even aware that this property existed north of the facility that's there now. I knew the facility that is there was there, but I didn't know that there was this property north, that it went all the way back to, so.
Yeah, so Mr. McCowan did provide a new potential layout that is going to require us to add another provision of the PUD. It already has been added and provided to staff, but perhaps we can address it here too. What we'd ask is that the individual homes not be required to have frontage on an approved street. If you've seen the other, if you had the opportunity to sit down with us, you saw the other version in which each of the homes almost sits on a private park. And that's a wonderful opportunity, but it does require us, I think, in the PUD to account for that when this gets approved by the ordinance. So I think we need to add perhaps a TE to allow for that provision to be put in here to not require frontage on approved streets for all of the homes that get built in here.
Is that a variance or a TE? Just out of curiosity. Is that a variance to the subdivision regs? I don't know.
I don't think so.
I agree with the notion, but I just don't know.
Because I don't know that this will be
what's
platted.
the property.
I don't think it will necessarily be platted, but.
Yeah, you would need to add that. We don't need frontage on an approved street. These will just be drives that serve the individual units.
So just
Private
a TE
drive.
to take care of it. Okay.
In fact, they've already amended their document to read it such.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was putting you on the spot. I have seen this pretty picture. I don't know how many of the other
I've
commissioners
seen it.
have. But this is, to me, this is really a significant
It's a cool deal.
improvement to the layout, and is really, I understand that you're seeking donations from architects to design these little tiny homes. And it's a shame we don't know any architects.
Well, to be clear, I actually offered to recuse on this case and was told not to. I am providing pro bono services on the project. If anybody has any issue with my voting on this today, please let me know.
No, I wouldn't let him recuse over something like this that he's donating his time
Obviously,
for.
I'm very supportive. I think it's a great mission, too.
And if there's anybody else listening who happens to be in the architecture business that would like to step up, by all means, get in touch with one of these guys. Commissioners, do we have any other comments or questions? I just think this is a wonderful thing.
How is this funded?
Very narrowly, I think.
Thankfully, we were very fortunate to receive the initial seed money from Impact Oklahoma. It was a grant process that we went through, and they're supporting our project. And thanks to the great support of professionals in the community that are donating their talent and services, and then also we're engaging with a lot of construction company folks in the community to donate materials. So we're very confident that we'll be able to make that initial $100,000 gift from the group Impact Oklahoma go even further. In this initial phase, we should be able to build more of the homes than the original plan called for because of that added level of resource. And we will continue to fundraise, just like we do for all of our services, for this improvement and addition of brick and mortar housing for our young people.
Anybody else did?
Is there anybody else signed up that wants to be heard on this item? No?
Okay, I will make a motion to approve item number 12, PUD 1695, and we're going to add the TE that housing units do not have to face front onto an approved street.
Correct.
And we're going to amend TE number 1 to indicate that the sidewalks will be built
to the
south of the northernmost drive.
Yeah, up to the southern point of the northernmost drive.
Right. To the southern point of the northernmost drive. That's my motion.
I wholeheartedly second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 12 with those amendments and additions, which I'm going to hope that the clerk caught. that the sidewalks will be limited to the area south of the northernmost drive, and a revision that the units are not required to have access to a public street.
Frontage on a...
Frontage on a public street. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 13 is case SPUD 1080 to rezone 301 Northwest 96th Street from R1 to SPUD 1080.
David Ledbetter, 2612 Directstone, here on behalf of the applicant, Rod Myers. I understand Madam Chair has concerns about the potential street development, and I'm quite happy to ask for a continuance.
Oh, that'd be lovely. I would like to be able to sit down with you and discuss this. And I'm sorry we were not able to do that before today, but if you have the time, I would like to take the time to do that.
Sure, so I will request a continuance for 2 weeks.
Thank you. What's that date? Let's make it a date certain. October 25th.
Very good.
Great, thanks. Do I have a motion?
Second.
A motion, a second to continue item number 13 till October 25th. Would you cast your votes, please? It's continued. Staff will be able to give you contact information for me. Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Item 14 was continued. Item 15 is case PUD 1693 to rezone 9900 North Kelly Avenue from R1 Single Family and R4 to PUD 1693.
Well, we'll pause here slightly to allow a couple of our commissioners to step out. I know. So we're down to a pretty narrow margin here. But let's go ahead.
Madam Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Brian Kuhn with Hewitt Zollers, represent the applicant, 2832 West Wilshire. I'm going to try to speak slowly so I cover all of my points today, so I usually talk faster, but I'll try to slow down. One thing, and I'm not having all of our supporters going to come up and speak, but I would like for them to stand. Anybody that is in favor of our project, please stand, please.
Thank you. Thank you for coming down and sitting on those very hard benches.
Thank you very much. This project's out at Britton Road and Kelly, north of Britton Road, east side of Kelly, south of Centennial School, if you're familiar with that part of town. We have 102 acres, and what we are proposing is several different uses. We have 5 tracts. The land currently is zoned R1 and R4. Tract 1, which is this in red here, is currently zoned R4 for multifamily. The rest of the land is zoned for R1. The property here that we do not own is a TV tower, and this little piece here, this kind of a panhandle piece, is one of the guy wires for one of the towers. So that's why we don't own that. So what we're asking for and what our proposal is for I-1 uses over the entire site except for this corner, which is C3. This is I-1 up in here. This land is designated in the comp plan as an employment reserve area. So it's an area reserved to create lots of jobs as far as the comp plan. So what we've asked for, again, is I-1 over the entire site with some residential. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But also in this tract 1 and 2, which is pretty much this triangle piece here, we're also asking for to be able to do composting on that site. One of the other, if I could look at another exhibit here. This is a topo map of the property showing the contours and which way the land slopes. Our composting rows, which I'll show you pictures of them in a little bit, are right in here. Right here, there's pink line, you probably can't see the pink line, but that is the top of the hill. So all of this land east of that ridge drains to the east. We are reconstructing this pond here as a retention pond. I know you've heard the words a lot in this room, detention pond, but the state regulates what happens with composting facilities. In this case, we have to retain a 100-year storm plus a 1 foot of freeboard into that pond so that the water off of this use does not leave the property in those sizes of storms. Again, one of the things, and I'll talk about it a little bit also, is one of the things that some of the protesters had an issue with down in this Tower Lakes Office Park was that this would drain into their lake, which is a very beautiful lake. You've seen the offices that are around it. But this water comes over to crosses Britton Road at about the half mile east of the Tower Lakes property. So this compost use does not drain to those Tower Lakes. One of the other things I'd like to show you, I think one of the concerns in the original PUD document, we talked about utilizing a temporary building for our offices. We are going to use that while the other building is being built. This is what our office is going to look like. The composting, which is really the only detailed use that we have at this point, we'll only have probably 3 to 4 employees, so it's not a heavily employed area. But this is an area that you could pull up your pickup truck. Landscapers can bring their landscape material, grass, clippings, trees, bushes they've ripped out of your yard, and come out here and bring that to our site. But you also, as a homeowner or a business owner or landscaper, can come and purchase the composting. We're going to have 40-pound bags for sale to the public and as far as to businesses. The other is just other pictures of the site, which we really don't need to talk about right now. One of the things that I did mention, and I showed you on that other exhibit, the composting rows, and I will explain what those are. What we do is we will be importing grass clippings, tree limbs. When there's a major storm, tree limbs can be brought to our site, or as a homeowner, if you pull out bushes out of your yard or trees or whatever limbs that fall, you can bring them to our site. We're going to utilize those. We're going to grind those up. We will be selling wood chips also, but we will also take that material and be mixing it into with the other soil that's at the site. One of the things that we will be importing, and it is in your document also, is we will be getting the horse manure from Remington Park, which comes in trailers mixed with hay or with wood shavings that come out of the stalls. So that material is then mixed together, what we just talked about with the wood chips, the limbs that have been ground up, mixed with the hay or wood shavings, with horse manure, and put into rows. It is put into those rows the first day it shows up, so it doesn't just sit in big piles for days. They'll deal with it every day that it comes in. And then they have what they call a turner, which is here. It's a machine that just straddles both sides of the row, and it mixes it up. And that creates, it gets a mixture, and it creates where the composting can start generating heat, which is what makes it compost. This is just another picture of what those look like. Now, one of the things that we did early on, we started off talking with staff about I've never done this type of use before. I've done I-1, I've done commercial, I've done R4, I've been here a lot of times in that. But one of the use that we need for the horse manure is 8150.6, and the title of it is called Animal Waste Processing. Okay, 8150.6.2 is composting. Well, that got us off on a really bad foot with publicity saying animal waste processing. But your system in the city has titles of how things are labeled, so what we got off on the bad foot is people started thinking of the Purina plant, or if probably most of you aren't old enough to remember the Wilson Food Plant of animal rendering. And one of the things that happened to us really early is that one of the news channels went door to door around the neighborhoods and said, did you realize this is going to be an animal processing plant or an animal rendering plant, which is not true. Never was going to be that. We have no food scraps here, no animal parts, no dead animals off the street. The only animal waste we will be having is the horse manure from, it could be other places, but mostly Remington Park. We have it in our document that it will be limited only to horse. I know that sounds maybe funny to hear that here, but that's the case. One of the things that the staff wanted to do, since it is an employment reserve area, they wanted to create as many potential uses for jobs in the future. This is a great area of Oklahoma City, lots of growth out there. So in our document, we originally had the uses that we could not allow on our site, and they asked us to amend the document to uses that we will allow. And there's a lot of uses, and I know that bothers Planning Commission sometimes, but they want a lot of potential jobs to happen here that could happen. So that's why we have so many uses. Again, like I said, in the comp plan, it's labeled a employment reserve. Now, we have received a lot of protests. There's no doubt you've seen a lot of letters. I have a booklet that I'd like to talk about for a minute. We have had, early on, two of the owners of businesses to our west, I'm not sure if it's Kelly Lakes Office Park or Cedar Lake Office Park, called and started asking questions. They invited us to come to a meeting, and we had it in one of their conference rooms in one of the office buildings. I was really appreciative of the gentleman that had put that together. And I would say probably 15, 16, 17 different people came to those meetings. And we had a good meeting, lasted about an hour. Lots of questions were answered. I hope some fears were alleviated at that meeting. But again, after that, then we had 2 on-site meetings, back-to-back days. I think we had them from 4 to 5 or from 4 to 6. We had a tent set up. We had the rows that I showed you earlier. We had them flagged so that they could see this is happening on the other side of the hill. So actually composting you will never see from Kelly Avenue. You'll see our building as you pull off of Kelly, but you will not see the actual composting happening. Again, we also had a pile of the tree limbs. We had a stack of the wood chips after they're chipped. We had a pile of the horse manure that came from Remington that was mixed with the hay. And then with our 4th pile was a pile of compost. And I asked everybody to walk around it and smell what you smelled, and not one person said anything about that smelling. So it was informative to me, being a city boy. I didn't have any idea. We kept a lot of records on the protest letters as well as people that came to those meetings. People that came to people that were on our protest letters, 8 of those showed up at our meetings. 2 of them did not attend meetings, but we did talk to them. We've at least called or tried to get hold of every protester. 8 were called and left message, but no return calls because we wanted to talk with them. And then there was 1 that we could not find. One of the neighbors, we could not find who they were or what property they represented. There's a couple other pictures I would like to show you also. And I'd like to address also, yes. One of the things too, and a couple of things that you've read in the letters of protest, one of them quoted an animal waste plant. This is not a plant, as you've seen. We're going to have about 4 pieces of machinery. One's a bagging machine that is actually pulled behind a pickup, so it's not very big. You saw the turner, which is probably 8 foot tall. It straddles the composting. Those piles are about 6 foot high when they're at the beginning, and then they shrink as the decomposition goes on. So anyway, animal waste plants, one of the things. The drainage is one of the issues that was on several of the letters, and I've shown you that this composting does not drain to the lakes. One of the protest letters talks about the C3. They were concerned about the C3 corner of having outside display. In Oklahoma City, outside display is listed as 8300.54. We do not include that in our PUD. We don't want outside display either on any of our commercial uses. 6 of the comments titled Waste and Recycling Facility. So yes, we are recycling trees and brush and those kind of things, but no other materials. 3 of the comments were drainage to the pond. 2 of the letters said we don't want a fertilizer plant. So again, this is not a plant, just so I hope you understand. One of the letters came from the hospitals that are over on Broadway Extension, quite a ways away, and I think one of their fears is if you've ever been in that area in the wintertime when the wind's from the north, you do smell the perina plant every once in a while. I think that's one of their concerns. But like I said, we had the horse manure fresh from Remington out there at the site, and it didn't smell. So We don't plan on having smell. We have about 32 acres that we've designated for the compost, and we own 102 acres. We don't want to do anything that would negatively impact the rest of our land either. That was very expensive land, so we want to be able to develop that land in the future. I do want to show a couple other pictures if I could. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt your flow here.
No, that's
Could
fine.
you show us again the map that you have that shows the drainage?
Yes.
And just touch on that again briefly for me. So you were right that a number of the letters of protest touched on other lakes. Where are those other lakes relative to your property and relative to the...
Well, there's a pond up to the north. I'm not even sure if it's still viable or not. It may have dried up some years ago. I don't know. It still shows up. The topo map, there's a pond right here, an old pond that we are going to rework. That's our retention pond, which is here. And again, there's a hill right here, top of the property. There's the top of the ridge basin that's right here. So this composting will be draining this way to this pond we're going to be building here. Okay, this is the one that runs down here. The Tower Lakes is served by this draining basin down here, which cuts across our commercial corner. This basin over here, where the composting is, goes into a creek over here, and then crosses Brick Road almost a half a mile east of the section. Does that help answer that?
It does.
Okay. So that takes care of that. The exhibit she's holding up, we have really done our best to track where the protests are coming from and trying to address their concerns. Like I said, we've had 3 meetings, and that map showed where they are. Now, one of the other things I did want to talk about, when it talks about smell, there's a composting facility down near Goldsby, south of the Riverwind Casino, probably 2 to 3 miles. There's Markham Nursery down there, and there's also a restaurant called Libby's. Libby's has an outdoor patio on their east side. On the east side of Markham's Nursery, which is east of that patio, is a composting facility that Markham Nursery makes their own compost. So there's apparently the people that eat at Libby's aren't concerned about the smell because they'll eat outside there. There's another one in Norman that you might hear about today, also from protesters. City of Norman is big time into composting, which I think is a great thing that we could start doing here in this community. But the City of Norman composting facility is next to their sewer plant down by the river. So I think if anybody goes to visit it, I think the smell that they're going to have or experience is from the sewer plant. Composting done correctly does not create an odor. Just wanted you to know that. Now, one of the other things I wanted to show you and learned about this site about a week ago, I guess, 2 weeks ago. There's another site, and I'm not going to tell you where it is because I don't want to get in trouble, but there's composting going on this site. There's a house here within 557 feet of it. There's a house here 646 feet, a house 562 feet, one 284 feet, and one 731 feet away from actual composting going on in our city limits. So I don't want to leave it up too long. Again, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I just want to show that this is happening in other areas of our city, and it's not bothering the neighbors, just so you know. And again, there's a couple houses around our property, but we don't have any protest from homeowners at this point. We've had 2 meetings on site. Your chairman came to not one of the meetings, but she's been to the site and has seen where we're going to operate the composting, where the rows are going to be. Mr. LaForge, I'm sorry he couldn't be here today. We met with him in his office. He also came to one of the meetings, and when we walked over the hill, so I could show him where these rows are going to be, as we were walking back to the parking area where the cars were, his words to me was, I don't have a problem with this, because again, it's on the other side of the hill from Kelly, so no one will see what's going on. The property east of us, again, is the top of the TV tower here. East of this is the new Kimray campus. They're going to relocate their campus. You've probably heard about it for years. They put on hold for the economy. That's back on. Mr. Hill came to our first meeting. We've met with him a couple times, and we have a letter from him, and he spoke at the meeting said, I like this. I like what's happening here. He is going to be putting $100 million investment on this property right here. And he says, I don't have an issue with this at all. And like I said, we got copies of the letter, if you'd like a copy of that letter, in support of what we're going to do. So I would think as far as a neighbor and investments, that's a pretty good indicator of what's going on out there and how he sees this as a huge benefit to the city, and it doesn't hurt his property in any way. One of the other protests was from the school to the north. One of the things, and I'm not going to have Gary get up and talk about this, but he talks about that he wants to have classes out here to teach the kids how to have a garden. And his comment is, once you teach a kid how to grow his own vegetables, he'll never go hungry. So we want to teach the kids what this is all about recycling, your green waste. The green waste in Oklahoma City takes up 1/3 of our landfills. These kind of facilities could eliminate that, which I think could be huge for our environment. I'm going to ask Susan Bergen to come up in a little bit. She's the developer of this property, and talk about one of the comments that she has made. She lives in Norman, and her assistant Pam is who is with her also. They have no trash that goes to the landfill from their house. Norman picks up green trash, or if you want to call it trash. They also recycle plastic. She said we have nothing in our trash cans at all nowadays because they're recycling everything. And I think that's huge for Oklahoma City. Again, I mentioned Kim Ray. Would be glad to answer any questions. I'd like for Susan to come up and just talk a little bit about who she is, just so you know this is not just some entity from New York coming into town saying we want to do a composting facility. Just you can see and hear her heart about this. So if that's all right, I'd like to, unless you have questions of me.
Normally when there is language in the staff report that indicates that screening will be required adjacent to residentially developed land, that's something that always catches my attention, because I know that there are a number of uses that are on residentially zoned property that may be just as negatively impacted by commercial or industrial uses. But if I recall correctly, when I was out at the site and we were standing in the area that would be the composting area, I could not see the school from where we were standing.
That's correct.
So is that just the lie of the land, or is it because of the tree screening? Why wasn't I seeing the school?
Well, it's the lay of the land. The school is over the ridge that I talked about. Where we were standing that day, we weren't quite on top of the hill, but we were close. So the school, as you see, this is the top of the hill right here.
Right.
The school is over here. This land slopes this way. So that's why you didn't see the school. One of the other things I want to address, I'll go ahead and address it while I am here, if that answered that question.
So conversely, if we couldn't see them, they won't be looking at the composting?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we will be putting up a fence along that boundary because we do have equipment, and we don't want kids coming over into our property messing with equipment after school or whatever. I don't know, none of you all probably did that when you were in school, but I might have. So we want to make sure it's a secure site. Now, one of the other things, one of the TEs, we agree with this, the number 2 and 3. The first TE talks about taking out any R1 use. We have a gentleman here with us today, Terrence Crawford, that is from a group that does what they call agri-hoods. There are neighborhoods that have community gardens, and they have seen this site, this tract 3, as a potential of being that, what they call agri-hoods. And I think it's great for the environment that you could have community gardens within the neighborhoods. But this is the only site that we have that on. And that is something that Thomas Hill of Kimray got really excited about, because he's going to build a campus here on his I think he has 140 acres, maybe 120, that he wants places where his employees could possibly live, where they could walk to work. He's going to have he's going to have trails all over the place out here. I don't think I've seen anything like that yet, but he was in favor of us having some kind of a housing over in this area here. So I would like to keep that TE in. Again, you would see the plats if we came back with a preliminary plat or final plats. You would see those come before you in the future. But I want to keep that potential in here. Staff wanted it out because that doesn't really create jobs, but I think it kind of does if it creates more jobs in this area where people could live near where they work. So I think it could be a potential plus for an employer that says, you know what, I would like to be there because my 50 employees would have a chance, not all of them, but some of them would have a chance to live and work and walk to work that way. And like I said, Kim Ray was excited about that. Any other questions for me before I sit down? I want to make sure that I've addressed any questions you may have before I sit down. Obviously, I will get back up. Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us an indication of the size of the vehicles that will be transporting materials into your facility?
Anywhere from a pickup truck that you may bring from your house, or a smaller landscaper, or a landscaper that may have a 20-foot trailer. The landscape contractors you see around town. There could be semi-trucks that bring the manure from Remington Park. And they come in containers, sealed containers. They're covered. There's not like things flying out the top of them as they're transported. So there would be as many as possibly 9 trucks per day when Remington is in operation.
And your on-property roads are, I guess, are primarily dirt, gravel?
No, it's impervious surfaces. We don't want dirt roads. No, not at all. And one of the things also that Gary, like I said, I won't have him come up and talk, but he has operated 2 dirt operations in Norman for many, many years. In Norman, if you have one citation, it's a $10,000 fine. He has never been cited in Norman for any dirt going onto the roads from those mining operations. And those are trucks coming in and out just hauling dirt. So we're going to be very conscious of that. When you pull in, it'll be a concrete approach, of course, off of Kelly, and then it'll turn to some kind of an impervious surface, which could be crushed granite or something else. But again, to allow water to soak in instead of just running off. So hope that answered that question.
And
we don't want the dust either. We don't want dust.
when I was on site, one of the issues that I raised with you is that the internal circulation system will work in such a way that those trucks will not have to be backing up.
That's correct.
So that beeping noise that is so incredibly annoying.
That's correct. Now, one of the other things I think you saw in your TE, of course, the composting operation, you're pretty much seeing it here. We've got rows here. We're going to have a building over here within that piece there that, as you saw, and if you can go back to the aerial photo, this track is pretty much lined with trees, as you can see up there on the, I guess you can see in front of you. So that'll be where our building will be, composting over here. Future uses, you're going to have site proof or site plans that come before you, specific plans, and we agreed in there that we will start showing internal circulation of how those can work together, and maybe there can be some pedestrian traffic between the tracks. We want to be very cautious. We're not trying to encourage kids to walk across our composting site to get to the restaurant or whatever that's on the corner. So we do want internal circulation, so people aren't going back out to Kelly, back and forth to Britton Road. So we do want that circulation.
Commissioners, do we have any additional questions, Mr. Kuhn?
This is probably a question for staff, but one of the concerns is what city entity governs this and keeps it on the straight and narrow.
It'll be more than just city. The state, DEQ regulates this, the Agriculture Department regulates this. Again, I've already got copies of their regulations for how this pond has to be constructed to retain water. But I think there's zoning codes that will regulate all this too. I'm not meaning to answer for them, but we've kind of checked all that out. There's a lot of agencies that oversee this.
Is this the only one of these in the city, or going to be the first one in the city?
This is the only plan that we have right now is this.
I mean, any other similar operations run by other people? Well, besides the one that you
Yeah, the one.
Not like this, no, sir. No, sir. But I think it's something, and I think you may hear Susan talk about it. It's like Thomas Hill mentioned. He said, I wish these were in more places around the city so that we can have a greater access to buy composting and a greater access to drop off our green trash. And one of the comments you will hear is this is a great idea, but why here? Well, we could go up east of Arcadia or up by Guthrie, but the problem is you're not going to go north of Guthrie to dump off your small trailer of tree limbs. It's too far. So we want this to be accessible for people to be able to use it to bring materials as well as purchase materials. Because you can go to Home Depot and buy compost. You can go to stockyards and buy compost. But we want this to be nearer neighborhoods, near people that would both bring us their limbs, grass clippings, as well as buy compost to use on their yards or gardens. Okay? Okay, and I would like to introduce Susan Bergen, if I could, to come up and speak.
Give us your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Bergen, 1529 24th Avenue Southwest, Norman. I represent our family business, Bergen Enterprises, that was founded in 1965. Currently, I serve as the role of COO of Bergen Enterprises. I began working long after I got married, in 1989 with my husband and the staff. I started Peachcrest Farms in 2003, which eventually became a 330-acre organic fruit and vegetable operation. Peachcrest Farms delivered to 68 public school districts across the state of Oklahoma and became the largest farm-to-school operation in the United States. In 2015, I expanded my role within the family business to include the 20,000 acres of ranching operations. We have turned those into the largest animal welfare approved operation in the United States. Sustainability and humane ranching practices are what we practice, and we are certified by a 2-day audit annually. Our ranch in Sulphur is one of 6 locations. When the United States pulled out of the Paris Accord, the Noble Foundation stepped in to talk about climate change and the need for carbon sequestration. They have picked 6 ranching operations, and I am one of those, to study soil health, and to identify and quantify the term soil health. It's not currently a defined term. My role as a COO requires that I oversee all of our operations on a local and national level. We have real estate in 6 states. Another business of ours recycles wood. I wish you could have been at our staff meeting this morning. We inbound 28 semi-loads a day of wood waste. That is a direct diversion from the landfill. We grind that material. We're not baggers, we're bulkers. And there's a bagging facility in Oklahoma City that bags for all of the big box stores here in Oklahoma City, and that material flows out of our grinding facility. This year I was honored by Oklahoma City Beautiful. The mission of Oklahoma City Beautiful is to change the landscape of Oklahoma City, to go beyond beauty, to directly impact the economic development, visitors' impressions, sustainability, and quality of life. This honor was in part because of Peachcrest Ranch's collaboration with the Lynn Institute to put in community gardens in northeast Oklahoma City. Each of our businesses under our umbrella exemplifies our ideal of bringing change through careful environmental stewardship of land, soil, natural elements, and keeping valuable resources out of landfills and back where they belong to develop the soil. Stewardship and the natural environment sustainability allows proven systems to work to the advantage of our communities. In our northeast Oklahoma City location, Prairie Dirt Solutions will be managed with the same philosophy of excellence and attention to detail. I think we will be an outstanding clean neighbor with strict management techniques, and we will bring excellence to all we do. So thank you for that, and I'd love to entertain any questions.
Do we have any questions from Ms. Bergen? Thank you. Thank you for coming down.
Janet.
Mr. Terrence Crawford is here with AgriHood. If you'd be interested in hearing a 2-minute talk about AgriHoods and what they have envisioned out here, if that's potentially, do you want to hear from him, or it's up to you?
Briefly, I think I would like
Okay.
to, yes.
I think it's a neat thing, even in other areas too.
Hello, I'm Terrence Crawford. My address is 10739.
Hold that thing up so you don't.
10739 Dixon Branch. AgriHood is basically a community, multifamily, single-family, or mixed-use community centered around agriculture, a community garden or a working farm. That's essentially what it is. It's basically, instead of developing around golf courses, develop around community gardens. So it's across the country. You'll see them in Detroit, Atlanta, D.C., California. Houston is also a place that they do as well.
Do we have any here in Oklahoma City yet?
Not that I'm aware of. There are community gardens, but this would be development centered around the community garden. So.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any additional questions? We have a bunch of people signed up to speak.
I assume so. So that I don't forget to bring this up at the end. I know that we've had a lot of employment reserve loss through other items in the past, and so I do have one concern on the agri-hoods. I absolutely support the idea, and I'd love to see it in the city, but the Tract 3 issue, like, I'd love to hear staff maybe talk a little bit about it, and I guess, you know, the concerns with the employment reserve land and losing our, you know, ability to have these large tracts as we even talked about today in our special session.
I think I could probably just summarize what's in the staff report about employment reserve, and that the intention for this is that the majority of the land be used for different types of employment generating uses, and that it is envisioned that multifamily could support those uses, but it would have to be done integrated as part of the development to support the primarily employment use. So this type of land use designation wasn't intended to be a typical single-family type of land use pattern. So it is possible for some residential uses to be integrated into an employment reserve, and even around the concept of it, the agri-hood, it's just the density of single-family residential development, and the scale and the amount of residential low-density development is not typically the use that is compatible with industrial, office parks, technology centers, those types of things.
So would we be happier with more density? Is that kind of the gist?
This land use designation says multifamily may be appropriate when integrated as part of a holistic development.
We're okay with that. We'll go with TE1, the R1, we're fine with taking that out. No single-family detached homes, we're fine with that.
Okay.
Because we can do this type of neighborhood with more dense, multifamily type things, which I think could benefit. So we're good with that.
Awesome.
Okay. And I'm going to actually poll the commissioners. Do we want to take 5 minutes here before we launch into? I have a stack of people here who want to be heard, and we want to hear every single one of you.
I'd love to grab a water.
Yeah, let's call it 10 minutes, and we'll be back here. Okay, we're back. Yeah, do we have a sense that everybody who wants to be here is here? I have a stack of people who want to be heard, and as I said, we really want to hear from every single one of you. I would ask you, if you would, not to be repetitive of points that have been made by others. And I don't have these in any particular order. I guess I could go alphabetically, or I can just start from the top and work my way down. If those of you who wish to speak have any sense of an order that you would like to follow, this is your opportunity to say so, I guess. Would you come forward, please?
That we scheduled a long time ago, and so I didn't know that.
Okay. Would you give me your name, please?
Yes, if you don't. Thank you. I'm David Bohannon, and I'm a partner in the development group that has developed the Tower Lakes Office Park that Mr. Kuhn has referenced, which is just south of this property at the southeast corner of Britton and Kelly. And that's where the two, what we call the Tower Lakes are, which run down the middle of our development on the west side of the Tower Lakes, which is a 40-acre parcel that we purchased in 2008 and have been developing since 2011. We have built and sold 18 buildings now, about in excess of $20 million worth of high-end garden office properties, and then we also have another 16 or so acres on the east side of the lakes that we have zoned and slated for building larger corporate offices. We came out to Tower Lakes after developing what's called Deep Fork Creek Office Park, which is where Pearls is near Classen Curve, after we completed that development because of the success of the properties at the northwest corner that were developed primarily by a developer named David Neff. Anyway, he had success there, and we liked the property. We really loved the water. It's spring-fed lakes, and we loved the setting. We liked the proximity to Broadway Extension being only a mile away, and then we also liked all of the development coming east of Broadway, which includes McBride, American Fidelity, purchase of Opepco, and their brand-new mixed-use development south of the old Opepco high-rise tower. Thunder practice facility, insurance companies, television stations, you name it. The stretch of Britton Road, which is 4-lane from Broadway Extension all the way east, I-35, has become a successful commercial corridor, and we've experienced great success, and we want to continue that success, and we think that, you know, the land around us is prime for a continuation of that type of development. We have met with the applicant, Mrs. Bergen, and love Ms. Bergen, very nice people. Know Brian Kuhn, known him for a long time, have no issues with the people, no issues really with the concept. I think it's a good concept. I think it's needed based upon what I've heard with everything that's going on in the landfills, but just think that in a city with 620 square miles, there's got to be a better location for this type of concept. And the reason being primarily is the uncertainty that comes with it. I mean, we've been told that the smell will not be that bad. We've been told that the flies, mosquitoes, vermin, rats will not be that bad. We've been told that the water that runs off of this site will not flow into our clear spring-fed lakes, and that instead it will go into another watershed to the east. But we're not absolutely 100% positive that that will always be the case. We know that when you have these types of facilities, you're going to have a lot of noise caused by wood chipping, and that they operate during business hours, and almost all the development in this area is office park, so not so much a concern about residences living nearby because it's during business hours, but because of office and businesses. And then mostly we've got, like I said, over $20 million just on our half of our development overall in the broader area, there's well over 100 million of new development that's happened over the past 10, 15 years. And we just don't know. There's too much uncertainty. And once the horse is out of the barn, you can't put it back in. So that's my question, is what happens if the smell is really bad? What happens if the flies are really bad? What happens if the noise is really bad? What happens if the dust and the traffic caused by truckloads of horse manure from Remington Park and State Fair Park are really bad? What happens if people say, you know what, I don't want to develop out there because of all of this problems caused by this development? And so we end up having half of our property developed. So like I said, I like the people behind it. I like the concept. I just think it's too risky for this part of town. There's too much money that's been invested in this particular part of town, and I think if it's, if this is something that can go anywhere, which is essentially what we're hearing, then it ought to be good enough to put somewhere right near downtown, or in any other populated area. So, we just don't know. I mean, I've never asked this question, but, my question is, I guess, if all the negative consequences that could happen actually do happen, then what? What are we left with at that point? Because it's too late. The zoning's been granted. So that's really the objection that the association has, and I'm the president of the Tower Lakes Office Park Association, so I'm not speaking on my own personal behalf, although I do own an office building in the park, but I represent the other 17 office building owners. And in our meetings, they've asked me to speak for the group, and I think we also have others in opposition that are in the audience today, if you want to see them. And again, I can't speak for the whole group, but I think that they would all be in agreement with me that it's a good concept. The people behind it are good people. It's just the wrong location. So, anyway, that's what I have to say, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, Mr. Bohannon? Let me ask you, Mr. Karen, if you would, please. I won't necessarily ask you to jump up and respond to each of the speakers in turn, but let's answer this question. What if the problems that we don't think will happen do happen? What post-zoning approval process is there for making sure that the way you think this is going to work is actually the way this is going to work?
Can I ask somebody else a question real quick?
Sure.
Can I make a phone call?
I know that you had referenced earlier that there are a number of regulatory entities and agencies that are involved in approval of this kind of a business.
The question, my name is Gary Jones. I'll be operation manager. The safeguards are is good work practices. You know what you're doing when you do it. When the manure comes in, we mix it 3 to 1. 3 to 1 is enough to calm the smell down on the manure. We're going to mix our compost 30 to 1. So it's over the amount you need to cut the smell out, and when you put 30 to 1 on it.
Is that a regulatory requirement?
Yeah.
That's what we're asking.
No, it's not. We go above requirements just to make sure we keep that smell down. Because you can knock the smell down 3 to 1, but when we mix it, 30 to 1.
So that's very reassuring with respect to your specific operation. My question really is, if there were a problem with the operation of the facility, who would have responsibility for oversight?
Under the Department of Environmental Quality, if you're inbounding 50% agricultural material, the Department of Environmental Quality. The permit will be through the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, the ODAFF, which has already been out there. So they are your current regulatory agency. They're right there on 23rd at the state capitol. So the ODAFF is one of the regulatory agencies that you could call, along with the Department of Environmental Quality, any of your city agencies that oversee. You just can't have smelling matter there. So there's a whole host of agencies involved in this type of an activity. Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should ask our staff, within the city, who is it that would have responsibility for oversight of the operation of a facility like this?
Well, it would be zoning, of course, for our part, stormwater quality for the drainage. The nuisance part would be taken care of by the state agencies.
So there would be, a code enforcement component to requiring that the operation comply with the zoning that's granted?
Yes, their authority would be limited to the PUD, the zoning regulations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I guess I'll just start at the top of the list and work my way down. Christine, and it's Mick. Is it McMaster? No, McLashton. She had to leave. I'm sorry to hear that. The Department of Rehabilitation Services of Oklahoma. Would you give us your name and address for the record, please?
I'm Carolyn Pendarvis. I'm the property manager for the Department of Rehab. And I'm happy to see you, Dan. And this is my counterpart, who is also an employee with the Department of Rehab.
And so is the address listed here the address of your office?
Yes.
Would you give that for the record, please?
And that address is 3535 Northwest 58, Suite 500.
Thank you. What do you want to tell us?
What I would like to share is that I understand, and what I've heard today is that we have contacted all the different agencies that are associated with the state that would be governing the what-ifs that we've heard. And one of my biggest concerns is that usually DEQ is not called out until after the fact. So if there is no particular agency that is set aside that will be there to monitor this on an ongoing basis, then we're not sure. I have a great concern for it being at that particular location is because of our staff, which is located just to the east across the street from that particular site. And then for the concern of the students, when you're talking about various different type of trees, you're talking about things that are being ground up, you're talking about matter that is being transported in, you can have any kind of accident that could happen right there. We're talking about students, we're talking about state employees, you're talking about other private companies that are right along that umbrella. And if anything else, we always thought that at the particular time that we were going to develop our agency in that area, that that particular site would be developed for more commercial, as a commercial park.
For the record, my name is Brent Canale, and I'm an employee with the State of Oklahoma Department of Rehabilitation Services, and I do work as an employee at the location in reference, 9801 North Kelly Avenue. We lease that building, so we're not the owners, so we really don't have a stake in necessarily as much as the owners might, but we are daily tenants there, so we just are here just to represent those 350-ish employees that travel to our office on a daily basis, Monday through Friday. And so there is thoughts and opinions, I think, but not necessarily of the state, but just of the employees themselves about how this may impact our daily lives and also the surrounding areas that have started being vocalized already. And just we're here to observe. I'll also just comment on, I think, what Ms. Pendarvis has already stated well.
So tell me, as you're expressing concerns on behalf of your clientele, that's quite the right term, what are those concerns?
Well, I think they've been stated pretty well, I think, by the owner of the Twin, or excuse me, the office park over there on the northeast corner of their plat. Again, just the what-ifs would be a simple way to put it. I think that they've tried to address the concerns of the smell, the odor, also the potential for flies and winds. And we do live in Oklahoma. I think we're all aware of that. And I appreciate the 30-to-1 mix ratio, and I'm not super familiar with Norfolk. I've been around that, so I can't really expound upon it. But it sounds like they're going to great lengths. However, it's hard. When you do 9 potential semi-truckloads per day, it'd be a hard thing to comprehend that kind of load, if you will, being converted into something that's almost less than noticeable by any human within half-a-mile radius. So you can't pick one location that would be more effective just because wind gusts change on an hourly basis here. But I think noise level of traffic, wood grinding, and potential, again, odors and then other insects and vermin that might be attracted to it are definitely a concern to anybody, I think, that may live within a mile radius of there. So.
Thank you. Did you want to say something?
Yes. I'm Larry Davis. I'm the owner of the property that these are my tenants. And I wish I had more information, but I didn't get contacted by anybody about this rezoning thing until about a week ago when Brent gave me a paper that was just dropped off at that location. I never received anything at my house. I probably have more people in a concentrated area, and I'm right there across the street from this, and we have over 350 employees in that building, state employees. And, you know, again, I haven't gone to any of the meetings. I haven't talked with anybody really, but just you can't tell me that in Oklahoma when it's, 110 degrees out that manure is not going to smell. I mean, there's going to be some smell. How can you stop the flies and the insects? And without having a paved road, how can you stop the dust from coming up and migrating over into our property? And 400 cars need to be washed. Those are just some of my concerns. Again, I don't have anything to back them up with because I haven't been notified. Hopefully I can meet with some people and maybe catch up on the game.
So you've not been to the site to meet with the applicants?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, did you need my address too?
Please.
It's 2804 Southwest 121st, Oklahoma City.
Thank you. Let me be really clear about where your property is located.
We're in the large building, 2 buildings, right there at 9801 North Kelly. And this property is 9800 North Kelly.
Okay. I might ask staff just to, make a note of that and think about why this gentleman would not have received notice of the rezoning. You should have. You're within 300 feet, so I don't know what that's about. We'll see if we can get to the bottom of it.
Okay.
I forgot to ask Mr. Bohannon, I bet he's gone because he said the reason he wanted to speak was so he could leave early. Carolyn Pendarvis, can you come back to the... Am I correct in assuming that you also have not been to the site to meet with the applicant?
No, I haven't, and I just received a copy of that document last week.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Oh, no, that was it. Thank you. I did have yours just next, so that worked out well. Pascal, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Would you give us your name and address for the record?
Yeah, my name is Pascal Autry.
Autry,
I own an office building at the southeast corner, just across the street from this development. So that'd be, excuse me, the northwest corner of Britton and Kelly, in this small office park there. Anyway, I've been there for 5 years. It's a great location. We enjoy it out there. Kelly, by the way, is Route 66, the original Route 66, and it's a nice area. There's times where, people go riding by.
Oh, you mean that literally, not just that it's a speedway. It literally is part of the original Route 66?
I'm sorry?
You mean that literally, that Kelly is part of the original Route 66?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where they're redoing the
I'm not
turning
sure
it
I
into
knew
4
that.
lanes. They actually dig up the original brick roads when they do that. So anyway, my point is we enjoy officing out there, and we realize that development is coming, and they're going to turn Kelly into a 4-lane road where we are, and that's just progress, We did not receive any direct notice, and the way we found out about this rezoning change was the person who pays the bills for our development. We don't really have a formal association. He received a call from Mr. Kuhn, and they set up a meeting for us to meet, as Mr. Kuhn mentioned, on September 4th. And we heard much of the same stuff that they gave, and it sounded interesting. And they mentioned to us that, as they did today, that Norman does this right now. So I thought, well, this will be interesting. So my wife and I, we drove out there that following Friday, and we went there, and it's kind of in a wooded area off of Highway 9 and in a more remote location. And it was a kind of wet, cool day. We went out there and went to the posts, the piles that they're describing, and no smell. It's like, great. So we went and looked around, and this is a bigger operation. This is going to be a bigger operation than what we saw in Norman, in that they have these huge earth-moving machines, okay? They have these specialty, I don't know how to even describe them, but the manager there told us they cost $500,000 a piece to move this stuff up, this huge shredder where it just takes trees and pulverizes it. It's a big complex. So after looking at the facilities, I just went and stopped off at, they have this little office, it's more like a little portable building, and told the guy who I was and why I was there, and he goes, oh yeah, Susan Berger. Yes, I know she's trying to get that passed. I said, oh yeah, you know her? Oh yeah, she comes by and visits me about every 6 months and picks my brain, on how the business is and how to run it. And I said, well, I'm just amazed that it doesn't smell out here. And he goes, well, we don't allow manure here. And so, here we're being told at the meeting, September 4th, we've heard it again tonight, of these locations where they're doing this, and they obviously know, they've been there, they've talked to the manager, they obviously know that they're not mixing in manure, but here they're presenting it in this way. So it gives me a false sense of what we're being told, and more worrisome is what else we're not being told about this facility. They seem like nice folks. I'm all into the green. I'm all into, saving the fill of the dumps, that sort of thing. One other thing they're not telling you is it's not organic, meaning they're going to take lawn clippings that have, fertilizers, fungicides, herbicides. They're going to mix it in with non-organic waste, which they, have horses and cattle. They have vermicides designed to kill parasites, that sort of thing. So I think if you wanted to put it in your flower garden, I think it'd be fine. I don't think you should be advertising it as if you're, I apologize, I'm cold. So that they should be advertising it as this green. I wouldn't recommend planting my tomatoes in this stuff. Okay? So my main concern is the smell. Okay? And another thing is this wasn't brought to us in the heat of summer when this stuff really smells. It was brought to us in the fall. You know, we've all been behind the cow trucks or at the state fair and smelled it, you know, up close. But when it's cool out, it doesn't smell. So I think we're being hoodwinked a little bit here.
May I ask you, have you been able to, you said you met with the applicant, was that on site when they had the piles of compost and manure and clippings?
No, I didn't attend those. I did drive by on that. There was 2 days in a row, and I went on the second day, and it said 4 to 6, and I pulled up about 4:30, and it looked like I'd missed it because they were folding up the chairs, putting them away.
Okay.
So I just kept going. My concern is there's no limits to how many trucks they can bring in. You know, they can tell us the limits they're anticipating on bringing in, but if business is good, I guarantee you there's going to be more trucks coming. There's certainly not going to be less. The main issue with this seems to be on this animal waste, and I don't see why they just don't want to pull that out of the equation and not allow that. And then lastly, we had a lot of people shown here as supporters, and I'd kind of like to know, you know, who's not an owner, a business partner, an investor, or consultants who's supporting this, and who are neighboring business owners to this proposed development. That's all I got.
I think that's fair.
I'm sorry?
No, fair question on the location or the interests of the supporters. We had them all stand up in the beginning, or Mr. Kuhn did, but I'd love at some point to actually hear what the interests are of the supporters.
Hi, I'm Susan Bergen. I'm the sole owner. My family and I are the sole owner. We have no partners in that.
So I get your point. Let's continue with our fairly substantial list of people who've signed up to speak, shall we? And see how far we get. Is it Caleb Dillon or Dillum? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The name is Caleb Dillard. I'm here representing Exential Wealth Advisors. We office at 9108 North Kelly. And the company's primary owner is John Burns. John Burns also owns GB Investments. I'm Chief Operating Officer of those. That's why I'm here today, representing those interests. I was in the meeting that David Bohannon put together where we heard the presentation. We did get to smell clippings that were passed around. We did get to smell manure passed around. My thing with that is, you know, it wasn't fresh, so it's had time to cure. It's had time to off-gas, so that the time that we're smelling it is the best time you can possibly smell it to get the lowest odor, you know, kind of reading on it. So that's kind of in line with what my biggest fear is the smell from the animal waste. My family raised cattle out in eastern Oklahoma, and, you know, the manure that they put off, it isn't that bad. It's manageable, you know, whenever it's spread out over acreage. Whenever you're hauling it in and you're piling up in rows, mixing it with hay, that's what my concern is there, that the concentration of that will be that we can smell it over in our office park. So that's the number one concern. Number two would be the noise. It's occurring during business hours. The office park over there, We've heard it called luxury office space. We wouldn't necessarily call it that, but it is very nice. We've been in the area 18 years. The average salary at our Oklahoma City location, Oklahoma City is our headquarters. We also office in Frisco, Texas, San Antonio, Texas, and Old Lyme, Connecticut. Oklahoma City is our headquarters. Our average salary in the Oklahoma City office is $100,000, north of $100,000. And so that just kind of speaks to the complex there, the employees there, the businesses that have chosen to locate there. And that's what our concern is that we've made an investment in the real estate there over the last 2 years. It's substantially developed, and that we've got another building going up. It should be completed here in a couple months.
Sir, I hate to interrupt you, but would it be safe to say that all of the points that David Bohannon raised, you would agree with?
I would agree and elaborate on those more, yeah.
Okay, so you just felt like there were things unsaid on smell, noise, property values.
Yes. So it may be said, well, not everybody has attended, the on-site show of the facilities, but everybody knows what cow manure smells like, knows what horse manure smells like, especially fresh. Each time you're turning it,
I'm sorry, I'm not sure that's true, but
maybe an overgeneralization. I'm sorry, but we all kind of know. I've got a 50-pound dog. I take her on a walk. She does the same thing, and 10 feet away, you can smell it from a 50-pound dog, and it's nothing meaningful. 2 or 3 times a day. But all that to say, we know what it smells like, even grain-fed, naturally raised animals, and that's our greatest concern is the smell coming in. Going back to David's point, how do you monitor it? How do you complain? If they get a foothold in this facility, what's to keep them from expanding into the other acreage with the argument of, hey, we've already got this facility, we would just be expanding it, to X lot, moving west, moving north, whatever that may be. So the expansion propensity is there.
thank you.
Any
Do we have any questions? Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Randy, is it Trachtenberg? No, come forward. Give us your name and address.
Randy Trachtenberg, 1212 Glenwood Avenue. To save the council some time, I believe that most of the other landowners near our property have covered it. My concern covers what they've hit.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Can I ask you, have you had an opportunity, when they set up these, I'll call them a demonstration for lack of a better term, on site where they have had the material that they intend to use and then the material they intend to produce, were you able to attend those?
I was not. I was out of town, but I'm in the same property as Mr. Bohannon represents, and he just discussed what was covered with me.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I did not ask, is it Mr. Dillard? Is that what you said your name was?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you, come forward, I'm sorry, I have to ask you to come forward because we're, televising it. Were you able to attend the demonstration on site?
Not the on-site, the one where they had a presentation in one of the office buildings,
Okay.
I believe on the northwest corner,
Okay.
where they brought the samples to it.
Okay. Thank you. Here's a name I can read, Gary Jones. I'm sorry? Oh, okay. Terrence Crawford. Okay. So I'm whittling it down here. Kamala Gamble.
I'm Kamala Gamble, 2834 Guilford Lane. I'm in support of Ms. Bergen's Prairie Dirt Solutions. And I had things I was going to say, but a fair amount of them have been said. But just to speak to whether or not Mrs. Bergen will do what she has said, I've watched her take conventional operations into sustainable operations and animal welfare operations. I'm sorry, and I have no financial interest in anything that she has. I have an urban farm. I come here as an urban farmer, as a suburban mom, and as a concerned citizen, and those are not mutually exclusive things. I would be an end user of the compost product. I have had 2 acres in cultivation in suburbia for 18 years. I brought 50 organic, sustainable farmers in addition to other folks last night. That's 50 potential people who would like to have access to this wonderful compost in order to be able to continue doing things like this. What I hear is a thread of fear. I have heard answers to the fears about the 30-to-1 ratios. I have stood in Mrs. Bergen's in her operations. I have stood in other people's operations that were actually feedlot-type operations, and there were not flies, not the ones you go by on I-70, or the one below that on Kansas, the Garden City, not Garden City, and then the ones towards Amarillo. But I have stood in those operations and done responsibly. It is done responsibly, it is done well, and there are not those issues. I have an urban farm. I've had one for a long time and have done that. And I entertain people coming through on Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, seniors, and all of these people. And when you have familiarity and exposure to these types of things, then you no longer have this overriding fear of what it might or might not be. I think that if we want to, we're building with the myriad gardens that I'm involved with Thunder, with all of the things that we're building in our city, if we want to continue to keep young people and not lose them to the other places, we're going to have to be aware of what we're building and what we're saying that we're really doing. Or are we still living in our little glass houses and our little things, and we're not going to allow those to occur? As a suburban, I work with school gardens, and if you have healthy soil that has the compost in it, then you will have healthy plants, and when we eat those, we are healthy. When the kids come through and they pull a carrot out and they eat it, their moms call me and tell me that they're now going to eat carrots and stuff like that, that it doesn't come from this esoteric environment. Now, these are anecdotal types of examples, but those anecdotals affect every single person. And if those people become better, it's been shown, this is my work with school gardens, but it's been shown, and it goes to the Agra homes that he's talking about, that Colorado has and all these other places have. Wouldn't it be nice if we were forward-thinking and going towards that as well? It's a thought. So in these school gardens, anyway, if they have exposure to it, then they'll do it.
Let me ask you,
yes,
if I could, to pull upon your expertise a little bit. One of the issues that Mr. Autry raised was the question of the use of grass clippings that have been taken from fertilized lawns, and trees that may have been treated at some point. The manure coming from animals that may have been medicated, for their health reasons, and the application of that on flowers versus vegetable gardens.
When it goes to us, and Ms. Bergen will know all of those even better than I would, but once you heat it to a certain point, and with the processes that they're using, it's going to heat it to that certain point, and it's not going to be an issue. I am not organic, I am sustainable, and so I know what I can use but I would use those. We get an organic, I could now use her compost instead of trucking it from Norman. And I do believe that accessibility is important. If we continue to push, like suburbs, if we continue to push everything out, and we have no exposure to it, if you don't see it, you don't know it. I believe we would benefit from knowing it. So anyway, I use you can use a 3-month organic pelleted chicken manure, and it's organic. Okay. Because it went to a certain heat. And the 2,4, many of those things can all be addressed through that.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any questions of Ms. Gamble? Thank you. Sorry. Robin Sparks. Could you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Robin Sparks, and I live at 1201 East Britton Road. I want to start by saying that I have been blessed with the best neighbors in the world. I've been out there for 35 years. I'm the only one that's within 300 feet of, I buck right next to this facility. I'm the only one out there 24/7. Before them, it was Aubrey McClendon that owned the land, and then before them, it was the Gaylords. And I know the Bergens are just as comparable, if not better in some ways. I have no doubt about their integrity. My two concerns are the noise, and from what I understand from the Department of Realtors, my hard-earned money, sweat equity that I put into my office home will be substantial, over about $500,000 minimum if this goes in right next to me, is what I've been told. And that's the only thing that concerns me. Now, the other thing that does concern me is I have been out to Mr. Minnick's facility that does composting, and I started talking with the Department of Agriculture, and the bottom line is this: they do not regulate to the point that these people are asking for. But do I believe Ms. Bergen will do this? Absolutely. More so than what the regulations would be on her. But the noise, when I'm trying to run my business, I'll lose money. When I go to sell my home, having an animal waste facility because of the name, if nothing else, the noise and the money for me is a concern. I am in hopes that I can build a great relationship with this neighbor like I have my other neighbors in the past. And I am also in hopes that they will know, because I am standing here today telling you the truth, that they can trust me, that I will not lie to them and tell them I'll be your good neighbor and then believe something else in my heart and tell somebody else something different. I won't do that to them. I will try to be there for them. I will oversee the land when they're not there, just like I have everyone else, and I'll nurture the relationship in the best way I can. However, I do know Kimray is 40 acres from their facility on all four corners where Kimray's going to be. It is zoned commercial, and that won't even affect me from where they're at. And it's not going to affect the neighbors that you're listening to, what Kimray's doing. It's far enough away. The other thing is, and I just lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. I guess that's it. I just hope that this doesn't hurt my relationship in any way with my neighbors.
Were you able to visit the site when they did their
I
demonstration?
was, and I did ask Susan, I said, Susan, 3 miles down the street, I can get you 60 acres for $500,000, which is a lot less than what she paid for it, and you won't have any neighbors 3 miles. So it's not like you have to go far. It'll still be accessible. You'll still have I-35. You'll still have I-44. You'll still have Turner Turnpike. Everything's right there. You just have to go just a little bit further. And then I also asked her, I said, look, why didn't you put this next to your house? It's hard on me. My life has changed, but they're the best neighbors I could ever have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Lester.
My name is Mark Lester, and I represent Pension Solutions and GoBop LLC, and our location is 9116 North Kelly, and we are in Tower Lakes Office Park, which is just south of Britain from the proposed development. I don't want to go over a bunch of things that have already been said, but I was one of the individuals in my letter that was concerned about who was going to be regulating this and exactly how it was. As Mr. Kuhn said, this is the first time this has been done here in our city. And so it appears what we've done is we bought a piece of residential property, and now we're going to rezone it, and somehow that's going to abate my nuisance issue in a way. Because if something is zoned commercial, the uses on it that would be a nuisance on a residential property aren't going to be a nuisance on a commercial property. But the effect to the neighboring properties are the same. And that's one of my problems there. And to reiterate what I think what a lot of other people have said is it is the what if, but to me it's more than just the what if, it's the operation. So on a day-to-day operation or weekly operation, who's monitoring the product that's actually coming in there? To me, that's bothersome. We've been told that there will be some kind of wording in the zoning that it will just be horse manure. But who's regulating that? There are more animals than horses at the State Fairgrounds. And I did go to the meeting on the September 4th, which was in the other adjacent office park to us. I did not go to the other two meetings. And I think there's some clarification that might need to be made is actually how many trucks, semi-trucks, will be going up and down Kelly. I don't think Kelly, in its current condition, can barely handle my car, to be honest. It's a horrible condition. And it's under construction. I just can't imagine the 28 trucks that we were told on the September 14th meeting that would be going up and down Kelly. There are 2 school districts, not just the Oklahoma City school, in the location. That's bothersome to me. There's 3 churches adjacent to our property. There's just a lot of different uses that I don't think relate well with that. And I don't think it's a thing that we're fearful, just to make that clear. That's another thing that's kind of bothered me about this whole process. I don't want to be, and I don't want my employees to feel like they're being environmentally shamed because we don't agree with a development, if it's organic or if it's sustainable. We just necessarily don't want it located next door to us. And as the prior speaker just said, we have an investment in there. And just this whole process today shows how much just to overcome the stigma of that label when you're trying to resell your property. So today, if it's fear or whatever, the stigma, the optics of it, when you find out, when you list your property or you're trying to recruit people, that there is an animal waste facility, because that's what it's going to be listed at, because that's what the use is. That's bothersome to me. And I think those things need to be addressed up front, not after the fact. And I think a lot of that needs to be addressed up front. What is the city's interest in this? Does the city have interest in promoting this for some of the reasons that Ms. Bergen had stated on the September 4th meeting about using this product to take care of some of the construction sites, to rid erosion in a more recyclable way or sustainable way, which is, a great concept. But if that's the city's interest, I think that we should know that. And in addition to that, today's presentation makes it sound like it's a bunch of organic farmers that are going to run out and get their organic matter, which, by the way, we've been told, and she was forthcoming, it wasn't going to be organic, and I don't have a problem with that. She was honest about it as more of a sustainable product. The problem is that in that first meeting, it sounded like it was going to be more of a commercial endeavor. And so I am one of the people that in the letter I said plant, because maybe I'm more literal about the term. You don't have to have a building to have a plant. It's a process. I'm an attorney. I go to seminars. They have document plants. And really, it's not a plant. It's a process, and that process is going to involve different aspects that may not be the most advantageous to, I think, the development of our area. And I'm very concerned about that. And I do think that this is a more commercial endeavor, that the end buyer of this product is not organic, local urban farmers. It's going to be state agencies and other matters. I do think that the 9 trucks hauling manure in is just a small component, so it makes it sound small. I'm concerned about the waste of other people bringing products into the area, landscapers going up and down on our property. We are right adjacent. Our building backs up to Kelly. The speed limit is 45. It's just I think a lot of things need to be addressed in a more thoughtful manner up front, and I reiterate that by what Mr. Kuhn said, that this is a first. And if this is a first, then maybe it takes, maybe we want to measure it twice and cut once type of situation. And in addition to that, back to the code on animal waste, is my concern is what happens if it's more than horse manure? What happens? How do we expand upon that? I mean, because the code doesn't say horse manure. And I apologize, I didn't review my notes again before I came here today. But, what's going to keep them from processing some other type of manure or some other product? And no offense to her, because it's the same to everybody. She's not going to live forever. I don't know what's going to happen to her. She's not going to be the operator of that property forever.
I think on the horse manure thing, isn't there something specific in the PUD?
There's something specific in the PUD, but how do you know that? I mean, that's my question. Are you going to be out there monitoring to make sure? Do I have to wait for a bad smell to come down to my, down to my business and my clients to be affected and my employees to be affected? That's my concern. There was talk about a covenant. Well, she can put a covenant on her property all she wants. I don't have the right to enforce a private covenant. I just don't know how I, as a person of interest in that area that operates a business, or as a taxpayer, has a right to enforce it.
I think to the extent that it's capable of being addressed, and I think you have exactly the same kind of ability or capability or mechanism of enforcing the zoning portion of it that you have with respect to any business. If you have a business and you're not supposed to do outdoor storage and you do outdoor storage, then there's a mechanism by which you report that to the city, and there's a code enforcement, action that's taken. And I mean, I don't think that part of it would be different with respect to this piece of property than it would be with respect to any. And do not want to engage you in debate about this because that's not my function here. But I think that there was never any question in my mind that this was a commercial operation. So if you had gotten the impression somehow that it was not, I don't know where.
I think today it was presented more as an organic farming community, which is a little bit different type of, to me. I mean, I think it's different having a Walmart next to you and having a small mom and pop shop. And I think there is a difference in that that just can't be passed up in the word commercial.
For us, I'll just say, the difference between Walmart and a mom and pop mostly has to do with the size.
Correct.
If they're both stores, they're both stores.
Correct.
Okay.
And the volume. I'm concerned about the volume. So I'm hoping that Walmart, based on their size, or any store on their size, is having the volume for that marginal benefit and effort that they put into it. And I believe that in this situation, there is going to be a larger volume based off the meeting that I went to than what was presented here today. Today I felt like it was about people who are going to come by their shop and pick up some bags. That's not what was presented to us in that first meeting. And if I misunderstood, I misunderstood. I don't have a problem with, saying I misunderstood. But I think it's a lot different if you have, state or city trucks, dump trucks coming through, getting product, or however they plan on doing it. I just think that's a big difference. When you live in that and work in that community, and you have those type of vehicles coming up and down, rattling your windows. To me, that's just kind of it speaks for itself. But regarding the enforcement, yes, I agree with that. But I also agree with the other speaker that said DEQ isn't going to go out there until after the fact, until there's something wrong. I think the city has an interest here in operating any type of waste product, any other waste product. I believe the city would, I'm not allowed to put certain things in my trash can. The city's going to want to regulate that. I'm not asking for an overlay of, some onerous type of government on-site, but I think there's got to be something, some groundwork, other than me waiting to have to call DEQ or some other state agency to look into a matter, because as I said earlier, these people aren't, who knows what this property is going to be in 10 years. I just don't think those guarantees are there, not that it is on any property, but there isn't a mechanism to ensure that at all, because as Mr. Kuhn said, this is new to the city, it's a new process, and I just think it needs to have more thoughtful consideration before it goes forward.
Thank you. Before you walk away, you had said that you attended a meeting and maybe a couple of meetings. Were you able to attend the...
I did not attend the 2 meetings that were in the evening. I did not. I
Okay.
attended the meeting where they handed out the samples.
Okay, thank you. Last one, Stephen Schwartz. You have waited a very long time to speak.
I'm Stephen Schwartz. I'm a property owner at 9401 North Kelly in Kelly Lake Office Park. I represent the association today. And like I said, I'll be very, very brief. I really only had 2 questions to follow up on. And it was one thing that David said earlier, and it was just, if there is some of these negative impacts that we're hypothesizing about, is there some sort of recourse? I know at this point we're talking about zoning and not about regulation, but that to me impacts the decision here that I'm not aware of that there is any. Once the decision has been made, it's kind of been made, and we don't have any, way to go back at it. And then secondly, we've heard a lot of talk of 9 semis a day possibly, and I'm just trying to be clear on it so I understand. That's 9 semis coming in to be mixed 30 to 1, so there's another 270 to bring other materials in per day? Is that, could that potentially be, and then that many more semis going out when they sell the materials? That's concerning, because that's a very, very significant scale to me. And again, this is all hypothesis, but as a business owner and property owner nearby, it's concerning. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
And I did not attend the event. I was out of town, but I did speak with the PR firm that they hired about the property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I've worked my way through my list. Mr. Kuhn, one question that came up again and again that I did not think to ask you about myself and don't remember you touching on was except for backing up trucks, is the issue of noise.
Okay.
Having recently had those people out to my house that clear the lines for the electrical wires, I know that wood chippers do make a lot of noise. So could you speak to that for us?
There will be wood chippers. I don't know if where Gary is, and when he comes back in, I'll have him answer that if that's okay.
Okay.
And I'm not going to address every comment because a lot of them are repeated, but I do want to address a few. We talked about the noise. David Buchanan about the noise and the flies. The uncertainty of, I think anything that happens that hasn't been built yet, there's going to be uncertainty as to whether we're doing what we said we're going to do. And we plan on doing that. I do want to address Mr. Davis, who owns the property where the Department of Rehabilitation Services offices. They are on the ownership list, and we had his home address as the notice, so I got that with Curtis to make sure that it was on the list, and he said a notice went out. Now, why he didn't get it, I don't know, but it was on the list, so I do know that. One of the comments made in one of the protest letters, and he's not here, I hate to even bring it up, but Mr. Garrett, who lives about a mile to the north, when I called him, because he's one of my clients, and he said, I don't care about the smell. He said, yeah, cows smell, horses don't. He said, I'm not worried about the horse manure. Now, we have put in the document that there's not going to be any cow manure. And, I mean, we can regulate who comes to our site and what is brought here, and we don't plan on breaking that rule of what's in that PUD document. So I just want to address that. Now, Kelly, I know Kelly is in bad shape right now. It's a 2-lane section line road. It is scheduled to be widened to 4-lane. But I will remind a lot of people that even on 122nd Street or Memorial Road, Kelly will be constructed the same way those roads are. Memorial Road, 122nd, every section line road that's 4-lane wide carries a lot of traffic. If you think of all the food service places that are on Memorial Road, there's the one on 122nd and Broadway Extension. Those roads carry a lot of traffic. If this doesn't happen and the city gets their way in this employment reserve and they sell 102 acres to an Amazon or a FedEx or another food distribution company, there's going to be more trucks than that on that road. So these section line roads are meant to carry a lot of traffic. So they're going to carry a lot of traffic. So the materials that come in, the biggest trucks are going to be coming from Remington. All the other materials are going to be coming from landscapers and those kind of things. So we're not going to have, we don't plan on 270 trucks of limbs and those kind of things. Right now, what we've been told is Remington says you're going to have about 9 trucks a day. And that's all we told everybody. We don't know we're not limited into that. We hope it gets busier. We don't know. But right now, that's all we know, and that's what we told the neighbors. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have. And Gary, she had asked a question about the noise of the wood chippers. How often do you run those wood chippers?
I'm Susan Bergen, and I'm the one that gets to buy the equipment, and it is painfully expensive, but it is Tier 4 emission control equipment. The tumblers the way they tumble, the sound comes in. Gary's been at my wood chipping plant this week, and all of that tumbling noise from inflow of material it draws it in. It's not an out. So, and the other thing about the volatilized solids is
it safe to characterize that as it's as quiet as a wood chipper can be?
No, because you didn't have a Tier 4 chipper at your house. No. So it's a totally different system than yours was not an emission-controlled device on the chippers that they carry behind the trucks. It is excruciatingly loud. It is. They, by any best management practices, you would have to have ear protection on that. We're not going to have ear protection equipment. So that just gives you a little bit of information about the difference of the equipment.
Could you characterize the level of sound? I mean, is there something we could compare it to? Loud as a car running?
No, my pickup truck, my F-250. So if I drive up in my F-250 for a takeout, I have to turn it off because the engine's too loud. If you drive up in a Honda Civic, it's not too loud to order food on the microphone.
So it's about as loud as your F-250?
It is a diesel-generated motor. The product will be at a 41% moisture rate. My staff has been trained by the U.S. Composting Council. So when we talk about volatilized solids, that's not going to be an issue because of the amount of moisture in it.
Explain what you just said. When we talk about volatilized...
Dust. So the equipment, it sprays water on it to have a high moisture content so that you can have the microbial activity to cook the product. It goes to 140 degrees within hours. It's fantastic. Mm-hmm.
One point that was made, and I meant to address it at the time, I think it may have been Mr. Autry, back to you, I'm sorry, a comment, but it may not have been, about the roads. And I think there might be some misconception that if you don't have paved surfaces, that means you've got dirt roads.
Yeah, we're going to have impervious surfaces. That may be crushed granite, some other kind, or gravel. It could be gravel, but we're going to keep the dust down. We don't want dirt roads. If we have dirt roads and we have the weather we've had this last week, we won't be in business because you won't be able to drive up a dirt road because of the mud. So we want them to be passable. Dust means dirt, dirt means mud, so we won't have muddy roads out there. We don't want that.
So you're talking
dust.
about pervious surfaces that are built to city grade, the requirement that we have for that kind of service?
For that kind of surface, yes. But again, they won't be dirt roads for dust and those kind of things. And I think we need to remember too, that we've got a commercial corner that we want to sell to people also, to have office buildings or commercial projects, restaurants, those kind of things. And we've got a potential housing project to the northeast of this. So we don't want the same things they don't want either to finish out this project. This 31-acre piece is not our only piece of land that we're going to develop out here. So I think some of our concerns in the future are going to be saying that they would have, we don't smell, we don't want rats.
I do think that is a compelling point.
Is a what?
To the fact that you guys want to put housing out there. That is one thing that's like kind of been trouble for me
Well, they already have R4 zoning on a big chunk of it.
Yeah, but they're showing that they want to have housing along with this development, and to me that says they're as concerned about all of the concerns today. And so, it's easy to hear all of the concerns that have been raised and be like, they got a point. But at the same time, this is the one thing that's keeping me. It's keeping me in. So,
Right. Well, I appreciate that. And here's the thing. Ms. Bergen doesn't have. We have to get zoning, of course. The people that are talking about this agri-hood came to us, thinking this could work out as a great partnership next to the school, next to Chemray, next to composting. So they addressed that. They came to us. So I think, again, I appreciate your comment that we're going to have the same. We're not going to stop at 31 acres of composting. We want to build commercial on that corner. We want other things on those other tracks. So we're the same concerns we're going to have also in the future. So, Curtis was just showing me some of the regulations, some of the state agencies. If there's any other obnoxious or noxious thing going on in this city or in this state, there's agencies that look into that. And that's again next to a housing area. We don't want rats either. So, anyway.
I think I would share this both with the people who've come to speak to us today and to my fellow commissioners. Not quite sure, but I'm guessing just from my own recollection that it may have preceded the tenure of most of you. But, we went through a rather lengthy debate and discussion about, composting fairly recently. I wish I could remember more clearly exactly what the context was, but composting is something that's allowed in R1, so it's not that foreign. It is not a purely commercial activity, and I remember on a much smaller scale all of the same concerns that you're expressing about rats and about smell and about insects. All of that was discussed at great length, and in the end, we determined that those issues were, for the most part, overblown, I'll say, and it's not a good word, but that they were more about fear of the unknown than they were about knowledge of the known. And I kind of have the sense that that's where we are with this as well. Mr. Lester had talked about the city's interest. I don't know that the city has any interest except that the interest that it has in trying to be a little bit forward-thinking and trying to, be open to new ideas in that sense. But the idea, there is a component here that wasn't discussed very much, and that is that an awful lot of the waste that goes into our landfills is the kind of stuff that this sort of a facility could be putting to better use. And I think, that has some appeal. There's no question about that, because the cost of relocating or locating a new landfill is it's enormous and problematic, and something that we absolutely would like to put off for as long as we possibly can. No question about that. So to the extent that a facility like this, or more than one facility like this around the city, would alleviate some of that need, that has some appeal to the city, and in my own view. And that point kind of comes back to the why here for me. The idea that, if you have something like this, it should be farther away. I think I am pretty persuaded that there's a tipping point to how far people will inconvenience themselves to access not just the purchase part of it, because you can in fact go to Home Depot or any place like that and buy compost, but the getting rid of your grass clippings and tree limbs part of it. If as a homeowner you actually want to do something else with those, then set them out to the curb for big trash to pick up, or dump them into your big blue. There's a limit to how far you'll go to do that. So I would like to hear from the other commissioners, see where we are on this.
My concern really is the school mainly. Do we know where the school zone is in relation to the trucks, where they go in and out? Or
The school zone out on Kelly?
Yeah.
I would bet it's probably 200 to 300 feet from their corner, so it would be closer to our Track 3 boundary.
Okay.
They don't usually go a
Trucks won't
quarter
be
mile.
close to there.
Yeah. And I think also one of the things too, and I think school zones are usually in place for pedestrian mostly. I mean, a lot of cars, no doubt, but there's no kids that walk to this school. There's no homes probably, well, there are some, I'm sorry, back to the west. But again, I don't see a lot of foot traffic on Kelly ever happening.
I went to that school.
Yeah.
I just had a general question in terms of the location of your facility. I'm sure you considered other locations, and it was suggested by someone that maybe you should locate further away. You made a general comment that you kind of wanted it located closer in, so Joe Smith could bring his grass clippings in and so on. I would imagine that the largest, supplier of your materials would come from commercial landscapers, feedlots, larger commercial kinds of operations. Would that not be the case?
No, most of them are going to come from the landscape contractors, that's no doubt, with the trailers, 20-foot trailer, 18-foot trailers, pickup trucks, those kind of things. Now, one other thing about this location, and Ms. Bergen, what she did a lot of soil samples in this whole region to see what kind of soils this land has, and 5 feet to 6 feet down, there's a layer of clay which keeps the water from permeating into the groundwater, and that's one of the reasons she liked this place. We've already brought out some clay material to line the pond because, again, we don't want our water leaving the site. So that was one of the reasons she liked this site. There's no doubt there's vacant land out further east and north from here, so there's no doubt about that. But because of the soil, she liked what was happening here. And again, the location is very important also. It's just accessibility. So I don't know if I had addressed it very well. She could probably address it better, but the type of soil that's here was one of the reasons she liked this property.
Well, and I would just have to remind both the commissioners and the other folks who've come to speak to us today, our job is not to find a good location for a business. It's to determine what the appropriate use for a particular piece of property is.
Right.
This is the piece of property in front of us. The question in front of us is whether this is a good use for this piece of land.
And to answer one more of your questions, I can't see your name, I'm sorry, but we will not receive any material from a feedlot ever, period. Okay.
They need how many votes?
So
you need 100% of the commissioners.
We need 5 out of 5, yes.
And I don't know where the others stand, but
You sound like you're about ready to make a motion.
I think a motion's about to happen, and I just wanted to give you guys a chance to.
You know, we feel like we've had 3 meetings, and we will meet again if anybody wants to meet us out at the site. The piles are still out there. We will meet with any protesters. If I thought that we could put some protesters' minds at ease, then we could continue. I've done that many, many times. You've seen me do that. I think the facts are what they are. We've presented, I think, every fact we know of. And so, yeah, I mean, Mr. Forge, I think he would support us, not sure, but I would think so. And next time you'll have a Ward 7 council or plan commissioner, but another one of you may be sick or on vacation. We just don't know. So I don't know. I just, it's always a gamble from where I'm standing. And I'm not going to say that it doesn't matter what you all say. We're going to go to council anyway, because it does matter what you all say to me. And I think we'd like to move forward today.
I would strongly recommend to you and to the other people who are here present today, no matter how the vote goes, that you have another, at least one more, demonstration on site.
Okay.
And for those of you who are interested in the outcome of the vote one way or the other, that you take advantage of the opportunity to go out and actually experience it to the extent you're able to, in a limited environment. What it is they're bringing in, what it is they're making, and everything in between. So I think we have discussed it enough, and I will entertain a motion. Unless somebody else has something they want to say. No? Okay. I will entertain a motion.
Okay. Before I make the motion, I'm going to say that it really is the point I made earlier, that I find it hard to believe that they would not keep their promises when they have business interests of their own in the surrounding tracts. So I am going to make a motion to recommend approval of this item to City Council.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 15. Would you cast your votes, please? It fails.
Okay, thank you.
That's right. Because it doesn't pass, because the motion fails, it's automatically continued.
Are we closed? Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What would make you feel more comfortable about what we've presented today? I heard the question from you, didn't hear from Mr. Hinckley. Is anything that we can do? We'll have another meeting, there's no doubt. We'll have those. So any other comments of what we can do?
Is there more information that you want than what you heard today?
That's my question.
I'm relatively new to this. The thing that swayed me was the school was against it, but abuts you.
Okay.
If you could get your school on board,
okay,
then I would probably be on board.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. We'll give Paul a minute to clear. I don't know what that is. Oh, okay. Yes, they're coming back. They're coming back.
Right. Okay. Are we ready for our last item on the agenda?
We are. Let's do it.
The last item on the agenda is the resolution for Planning Commission to recommend approval of the capital improvement plan to City Council. This was the document that you reviewed with the department heads in a study session, I think, a month ago, and then it was introduced 2 weeks ago with the addition of some material for, I think, the MAPS program was added since then. If you have any questions, about any of that, then we can ask staff to answer that. If not, then this is the opportunity to make a recommendation to move it forward.
Do any of you feel the need for further discussion on this item?
No.
Then I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to, motion to approve CIP.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 17. Would you cast your votes, please? I'm missing one.
He's turned off here.
That wasn't it.
I was drinking all of it. There we go.
I'm voting in the affirmative.
Okay.
Aye.
We'll take it.
Got that goal. There we go. Look at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
It is approved. And that brings us to the usual laundry list. Additional items, communications and reports, planning commission committees, planning commission members.
Just want to note for the record that Mike Hensley left and I did not. That is all.
And Matt Hinkle stayed till the end.
Yes. And that
First meeting.
I didn't run away.
The seniority deal, maybe?
Planning department, development services, municipal counselors. Oh, so we're just getting through here. Okay, so that's actually the end of my, no, here it is. Citizens to be heard, no one left. Other business, adjournment. I'll take a motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. Cast your votes.
3 more minutes there.
We're adjourned. That one worked.